Are we ready? All righty. Okay, this is Michael Yan. I think most people know that since you're on my channel. And so we have Mo in Japan and Masako in Japan, and Al is somewhere in the United States. Al Johnson and Masako Ganaha and I were recently down in Panama, and we really saw many things here in Panama, and we've been studying those very hard. And then Al then jumped back up to the United States to study what's going on with these data centers, which is obviously incredibly important. But there's so many incredibly important things going on. There's only so much we can do. And so Masako put this together today so that we would have Mo and Al and Masako and me on. But really, we want to hear what Mo and Al have to say. So I'm going to step out of the way, pass it over to Al, and let him take it from here while we listen.
Nope. Well, thank you, Michael. Just real quick, yeah, it was down in Panama actually that this project came up, and we were down there in Panama talking about how it's central to the region. You know, with not only Central America, South America, but the entire region, both of the Western Hemisphere. You know, Panama is pivotal for that, and it has been for centuries. And once again, you know that geography becomes a hotspot. And while we were talking to some of the connections that you had, a couple of them mentioned, you know, data and information and you know, why Panama is central to that. And kind of as that was going along, at that same time, you know, we were watching Doge and we were watching how, you know, it was interesting. The government seemed to be streamlining, but as you and I both know, you know, oligarchs and large power systems, they never give up power willingly, right? In other words, you never reduce the power unless you've got something that's going to replace it. And so that kind of got me thinking. And then it was another geographical hotspot, kind of another central area like Panama in the United States that most people don't think about, that suddenly came to the fore. And it was interesting because the same group, the same guy, literally, that's doing Doge, using AI to cut through and identify a lot of, you know, otherwise waste, fraud, and abuse, or a lot of excessive spending within the U.S. federal government. He was setting up, Elon Musk was setting up this massive data information center, this AI brain, probably the largest computer that's ever been built. And it's being built in Memphis, Tennessee. And most people would go, you know, why Memphis? But just kind of luckily, you know, I had grown up part of my early life in Memphis, and my grandmother knew the guy that was the Flying Tigers. Used to be before FedEx, there was Flying Tigers, and they chose Memphis because you could fly anywhere in the United States in short order. It was almost the population and the geopopulation, if you will, center of the United States, where you could reach most of the United States quite easily. And Memphis was central to a lot of things. And then FedEx bought out the Flying Tigers, and then FedEx has been operating out of there. There's like 6 companies, two of the big Fortune 500s in addition to FedEx, that do it. Memphis is a tremendous hub for America. Most people don't even realize you've got the rail, runway, road, and rivers all run through there. There's like 5 Class 1 railroads. So if a railroad makes over, I think I've got it in my notes here because I had to figure out what a Class 1 railroad was. But if you make over about $1.053 billion in revenue per year, you're considered a Class 1. Memphis has 5 of the 6 running through it. So it's got a huge rail network in addition to the airport, in addition to Seaport, in addition to 7 interstate highways, including the 3rd busiest truck lane in the United States runs through there. So it's 36% of the American population can be reached by road overnight, and 70% of the American population can be reached within 2 days. So it really is the center, kind of the center of the American universe, much as Panama is the center of the hemispheric universe. And in the middle of this is probably the largest computer with AI that's being built at this time, which is called Colossus. It's being nicknamed Colossus by Elon Musk. which again, he has literary references throughout, not just his name that his parents gave him, which is Elon, but everything from Grok, which is the name of this AI, is a literary reference to an intelligent helper within science fiction. And Colossus itself was named for a novel in the 1960s, later became a movie in the 1970s, which is about a supercomputer that suddenly attaches to all the infrastructure within America and therefore the world. And the computer says, I don't need humans, and it takes over. So it was interesting that, he would name this, that sort of thing. At Memphis, in addition, we found we found a lot of information about that there is a massive fiber optic backbone just south of the airport, and that runs through this huge national and then eventually international fiber optic information network. So Memphis really is becoming perhaps the center of things. And if you look at what Doge is doing up in the federal side, it's streamlining the government, but it's really not cutting it, is it? It's going to replace it, we think, because you build this giant central brain and it can take over. So you've seen, Elon Musk with a lot of projects for automating transportation, automating shipping, and he's right there in the middle of Memphis. So that's kind of interesting to us. And as we were in Memphis, kind of digging through this, just kind of by luck and chance, we ran across a connection, and the connection is to a guy that we've been looking at for a while, which is quite an interesting person, and his name's Larry Ellison, and he plays a huge part because if anybody knows tech, they know that that's Oracle, right? That's the guy back in 1977 that basically was able to get that database system, and it evolved into the backbone of everything in the informational universe. So if you're on the internet, if you do a bank transaction, if you're on a phone sending a message, you're going to go through Larry Ellison's program. You're going to go through at some level Oracle all over the world, no matter where you are. Just about everybody's trying to, when you see these nations try to become autonomous in the information, what they're trying to do is decentralize themselves from an Oracle platform. And Larry Ellison surprisingly has kind of a backbone with Elon Musk. We ran into some information that was open source, and basically that Larry Ellison had provided $1 billion to Musk to buy X. He was sitting on the Tesla board. He's got controlling shares of Tesla. He has a seat on the board. He was an early investor in Tesla, and he has a personal friendship with Musk. So Elon Musk, as Michael well knows, has a substance issue. So he does, publicly, he doesn't skirt around it. But there are open source reports that were in a number of magazines that were talking about Larry Ellison actually pulled Elon out to his Lanai, Hawaii estate and had him detox and said, "Hey, get back in the game here." So they're very close. And
when was that out? When did he have the detox?
So I go back, but it looked like it was 2019, 2020 when he had that issue. And so he said, "Hey, you gotta clean yourself up here." I'll get that exact number for you here with the magazine article. We'll probably put a link in the comments too. But they had a very, very close relationship. And it was very interesting because for a while, Elon Musk was working with OpenAI and a guy named Sam Altman. Now, flash forward to January when we were down there in Panama, where some of these little connections started to come together. And we see Trump giving the speech about, $500 billion being invested in an American project. And that project was called Stargate. And there is Larry Ellison, at the White House, standing next to Trump as Trump gives the speech. And next to him is Sam Altman, and next to him is somebody who's kind of interesting. And his name was, he's actually a Japanese, and I'll let Moe introduce him. But these three are positioned with $500 billion to be able to come in, and they're building something called Stargate. And Stargate is, in effect, a smaller Colossus, depends on who you ask, but it's going to be built in Austin, Texas, which is kind of close to Elon Musk's X. It's close to some other informational systems down there. But Stargate is another AI project using Sam Altman's OpenAI source that Elon Musk also worked on. But him and Altman had a falling out. Musk wanted to do it bigger, faster, and in a different method than Altman did. And so Elon invented or began to invest in XAI called Grok. And then he's building the supercomputer, which is in Memphis. And the size is stunning. You took me down actually to the Rio Grande Valley, and we were looking at SpaceX and all the construction going on and everything down there. And it was interesting because you could walk up to the rockets. Remember that? We walked up to the rockets. You just look right. There's no security, right? When we went, what was it, 2 years ago, right?
Yeah, like Panama Canal today, no security.
Yep. But you can't get that close to Colossus in Memphis. So it's down the industrial zone next to the Mississippi River, next to Nucor Steel. but they've already got it fenced off. They've already got guards checking it. They're already doing badge access going in there. So, SpaceX, no security, but Colossus, there was definitely security, and there's no contact. They say refer all questions to the Memphis Chamber of Commerce. They don't want to take contact. They don't want to take questions. They don't have a public affairs officer. They don't even have a contact for public affairs officer. So it's quite the interesting program, and it really aligns up with kind of what everybody's talking about, that AI is the new arms race, that it's really a competition between it. And what we think is happening is that Stargate is the U.S. officials program that's being built in Austin, Texas, with Larry Ellison, Elon Musk, and the Japanese Son, the SoftBank owner, who Moe will get into more of that later. Very, very interesting trio there, because if that works, then that would make it the official, so to speak, U.S. AI, right? With $500 billion that was invested into it, and that would control most of the information. Now, how does Elon Musk Colossus fit into it? Well, if the open source rumors are to be believed, essentially what Musk is doing is he's proving that his concept is better, and that he would still take that framework. And one of two things happen. You either can use these two in different systems in parallel. So there is the open source AI down there, Stargate, but you also have Grok doing another series of things, and it's in Memphis, so it can do transportation, whereas Stargate can do defense and other things. So will they work in parallel? Would Musk, as some rumors have it, replace OpenAI with Grok, saying, look, I built mine better, I can go into your infrastructure? That remains to be seen. It's really a competition between these two, but they're not so much enemies as they're frenemies at this point. I think Larry Ellison still has a close relationship with Elon. There's some back and forth between Sam Altman, who runs OpenAI, and Elon. But I think that Larry Ellison is really at the lead of this thing. If you look at the dynamics, the power dynamics, he's kind of the shogun of this new oligarch. Because you remember, we watched in Panama, the inauguration when they inaugurated Trump in there, and it was very weird because behind him there was a whole bunch of the tech oligarchs. Remember that? And it was people that didn't like him, that were against him, but yet they're all behind him supporting him, and that was a massive shift. And we couldn't at the time, we couldn't account for the shift. But now, looking at some of this information that's going on, it appears that Trump is facilitating, the Trump regime is facilitating this giant AI push, and the two centers are going to be Austin and Memphis. And the way it's looking right now, the Elon Colossus is leaner, smarter, faster, and it's being implemented a lot quicker than Stargate is. So, if is it Elon competing, and Larry's going to put Alton versus Elon? Are they going to work in parallel? Are they going to compete with one another? Who knows? But it seems it'll all come down to Masayoshi Son and what ability he has to bring in that $500 billion in capital, because that's what Elon has been mentioning. Now, real quick before I'll finish up here, just to give you an idea of the scale of this thing. Prior to this, one of the largest AI systems was about between 15 to 30,000 NVIDIA servers, right? So to be able to, the brains of this AI system. Almost right away, within a few weeks, Elon was able to get 100,000 of these H100 GPUs, which is from NVIDIA. So NVIDIA is like going gangbusters with things. He put 100,000 of these things in parallel and then initiated Grok 2.0. And then just recently in fact, when we were there, he put it online, 200,000 online, and that's Grok 3.0. His goal is by 2026, he wants 1 million NVIDIA CPUs online. So there's 1 million of these things going on. This thing is massive right there in Memphis. So the computing power that this thing has with artificial intelligence is pretty much through the roof. And there's basically 3 companies involved. NVIDIA is providing the CPUs. Dell Computer Systems. Maybe we saw them down in Panama. They're over there near the airport, the old Holloman Air Force Base. They've got a big part to play in this. They've got all the server racks and some of the communications.
Howard Air Force Base.
Howard Air Force Base, right? Down there.
The one thing that's important that you've mentioned before is that Panama is a landing area for these under fiber optic cables too. So it's another little center. It's the canal and also the passage between the continents, but also a lot of data lands here and goes through here.
Exactly. So I'd be curious to see if NVIDIA shows up down there. And then the third company that's doing the server racks is a company called Supermicro. And then the internal networking, we're lucky we kind of ran into one engineer, kind of helped us out a little bit, but he said it's the NVIDIA Spectrum X and Bluefield Super NIC, but both of them are pretty much NVIDIA. So this thing is massive. I mean, by 2026, the goal is 1 million of these. and then the connection. So if you can connect into the backbone in Memphis, pretty in short order, you've got connections to Dallas, Texas. There's a huge fiber optic goes to Dallas, and then from there you can go across the nation and internationally. There's also a map that we've got in the presentation we could show later. So I want to get to Moe real quick here, but it's phenomenal. They've also leased 552 acres for expansion, so it's a 785,000 square foot facility. The construction is gangbusters. They've got like 2 cranes out there. They've got digging. Their fiber optics going all over the place, and he's got his own generators out there. So he needs 150 megawatts of power. Memphis Light, Gas, and Water and Tennessee Valley is able to give him about 50 megawatts of power, but he's got to get it up to 150, and they're going to give it to him. He's going to build he's at his own cost. Apparently, he's going to build a new substation out there for power to draw in more power. Tennessee Valley is going to give him that push for the extra power. But in the meantime, he's got a whole bunch of generators out there that are, you can see the heat shimmer off of them. So he's got massive power and cooling for this. They're going to build a $78 million ceramic membrane bioreactor wastewater recycle plant. That's a mouthful. But they're going to build that out there by the Mississippi to keep this thing cool. But this, when it's done, it will be the largest, basically the largest computer and the largest artificial intelligence in the world. And again, it's running in parallel, so to speak, with Stargate down in Austin. Now that one has the official backing of the U.S. government, so it's quite interesting to see. Are they going to work in parallel? Is Elon trying to beat Altman in the system, and they're going to work that back into it, and he'll be back on the group, or what? We're not sure. And then big question I had was, what was
Masako's trying to say something.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Masako.
I don't hear you, Masako.
Sorry, do you want to show the presentation slide, or you want to show it later?
Just real quick, and then we'll turn it over to Moe here. Yeah, just real quick to give, so people give kind of an idea about it.
Okay. You're going to keep talking, right? Or you want me to show?
Once they come up, I'll start talking through them. So.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
Yeah, so there's XAI again, Colossus. From the computer, from the literary in the movie, the computer that took over the world. So interesting name. Next slide. This is pretty much what we just talked about. It's huge. It's going to get even larger. And again, that Masayoshi, son of Japan, is kind of the wild card in here. It's kind of like, where'd he come from and where'd he come in? And we know Larry Ellison is a really huge fan of Japan. He built a mirror of the Imperial Palace from the 15th century in Kyoto. He built it in California, imported it, no nails and things like that. So there's his personal predilection for Japan, but specifically why Masayoshi Son is kind of interesting, and maybe Moe can answer that, because that's kind of the wild card in this, when he was standing in the White House saying it's America's new golden age. It's quite fascinating. So next slide. Mm-hmm. And we've already talked about this, Memphis being the center of many things. Next slide. Yep, keep going. Again, and you'll see there's a map here. There's already existing interstate fiber lines. One thing I didn't say, Memphis has a program within 2 years. They've got millions of dollars of funding, and in about 2 years, they're going to have about 80% of that city is going to have fiber optic with something called Ting Internet. So it's kind of like jumping ahead on that whole smart cities, except they're going to put fiber optic, and they want it. They said even in the lower economic areas within Memphis, the depressed areas, the city is going to pay for that. They're going to actually make this gigantic network of fiber optics. So that gives redundancy and some security to an AI system, because you're not just on a couple of trunk lines. Now you have this huge network that you can work through with multiple access lines coming in. So in a way, it's kind of an interesting parallel, whether they work that out with XAI or not. It does, in the end, kind of benefit XAI and Memphis, if you look at it. So next slide. And these are the 3 main trunk lines. Now, the important one, there's a couple here. One, of course, goes to Atlanta. The other goes down to New Orleans. And like Mike was saying, the data center down in New Orleans has the line that can go down into Panama and then therefore into Central and South America. So Memphis is positioned already with 3 of the major kind of regional lines that they can work it out. And for those that don't know, Dallas is fairly close to Austin. So once you get your data to Dallas, it's a short hop and a skip to Stargate. So that may already be built up there. They just have to reroute it once it's in Dallas to go to that Austin node and Stargate. Oklahoma, everybody knows Oklahoma City. Huge amounts of federal data there. Atlanta has a lot of federal data within it. So this is positioned very well to be able to access. People think Memphis is kind of isolated, but it actually does have access data-wise to a lot of the federal systems. So if you look at Doge, now you can use Colossus to be able to kind of take that on in a full time. And will that be part of the U.S. system to manage data, to manage logistical systems, to manage things that go on? It's quite interesting. And there's more here a little bit later. So go next slide. There's the current location just south, kind of southeast of Memphis. There's a lot of land available, and it's rumored that NVIDIA is going to come down in there along with Supermicro and Dell. So the next couple months or years, we might be able to see it just south of the airport symbol. That's FedEx. And then the huge data centers are south of that. And then there's an interesting military unit near there too that bears some more investigation, but it's just interesting because it's based on information and getting information in and out quickly. So I think that would benefit XAI, and they've moved that from the active duty to the National Guard. So it's now a Tennessee asset. But again, this Memphis being 80% fiber optic here within the next couple of years, this is really going to become, it may surpass many places that we think of in California and Texas as far as an informational superpower, which could be right here in Memphis. Again, small things happen in Memphis, but with big results. Next slide. Again, these are all things that we talked about, what they may hook up with. Nothing confirmed, but the positioning, as you see, the positioning is there. The synergies are already in place that you could leverage the already amazing power of Colossus into other networks and into Stargate, into Memphis's existing system and into the national system. So it has a lot of potential here to kind of punch above its already amazing weight. Next slide. There's the construction. So it's there's some of the generators on the side. So they don't have enough power yet. They've got to get to 150 megawatts. So they just keep feeding these massive generators with the, you can see the heat shimmer there if you zoom in. But they're keeping this thing. They're digging a lot underground, and he's got 552 acres on the other side going out to the river and a little bit more south, where they can expand this already massive system out there with the 785,000 acre facility. Next slide. And already Memphis Light, Gas, and Water is out there working for the existing substation to trunk some more power to him. Those are the Tennessee Valley Authority big lines going through there. They're going to build he's going to build another substation. So there's going to be one more power station to be able to feed enough power for this system right now. Next slide. And when we went out there and took a look at it, there was two areas they were actively digging up to be able to build in some more fiber optic systems. One ran north of the facility, the other was running south. And then, just extrapolating within the Memphis network, what were they trying to tie into in Memphis? Next slide. In the northern one, there was a bunch of things. You could go to FedEx system, both the world and the ground system. There's a big data center, the 365 data center downtown Memphis. That's probably going to be one of the big data centers for Memphis. So that northern route may be physically able to tie into all three or one of these three items in there, which gives you pretty much, if you run FedEx, that's what they need, right? So if AI is running FedEx, that's a huge possibility right there. And again, they're both positioned very well. FedEx already uses a certain amount of AI within their logistical movements, but if you tie it into Grok, that gives it a punch and a power way above what it has, and it gives Grok a huge advantage because that's global distribution system from one of the largest distribution systems will now be in Elon Musk's corner. Next slide.
Importantly, while you had that slide up, just saw mention today about the idea of putting the U.S. mail, making FedEx, basically FedEx take over the U.S. mail.
And that would be, wow, that's interesting. So there you go. So, yeah. You've got Elon Musk already within that federal system. He's already working with the federal systems. He knows the shortcomings. And then he's able to say, okay, I'm going to adjust this AI, so to speak, this Grok system with FedEx. And then Memphis becomes pretty much central to that. So again, we see that gravity kind of shift to the Mid-South to the Memphis area versus, some of the other areas there. There's also a postal, now that you mentioned that, there's a large postal distribution center in Memphis as well. So I'll have to map that out because I think that's in that same route up there, just north west of the airport, if my memory is correct. But yeah, that's interesting. Huh. Next. Wow, that's good. Thanks. Next slide. Yeah, there's the data center that's downtown Memphis. Next slide. And we went to the data center, and sure enough, they're actually tying. So both ends up running north from Grok. And then when you go up there, they're actually laying more fiber optic lines going into this data center. And it's not labeled. There's no data center. We actually had to do some pre-texting on Grok, and it kind of gave the beans about where this was. So it was kind of funny. We had to pretend we were a substitute teacher, and we needed a tour group. And he said, "Well, try this building." And I said, "Okay." So we went there, and that's what it was. So Grok actually helped us find some of this, this information. So next slide. Again, that's working on that Memphis, the Blue Suede network with 80% to connect Memphis up there. So it's quite interesting. And then it can use those nodes that Memphis develops for its internal system to be able to go out. Now, whether that's the primary or not, it's, probably not the primary, but it does allow it to have some redundancy and then, a larger footprint as it goes out of that area. Next slide.
What's a Ting network?
That was interesting. That's actually an internet provider. And they came out of the East Coast, and it was both the Blue Suede network. They're actually, their office is listed out of the Memphis Chamber of Commerce building. They're kind of new, and Ting, I'd never heard of them until this. So both these companies that have this citywide contract are kind of new and obscure. So it looked like they were kind of made to order in some ways for this project. But Ting actually exists over on the East Coast. They're in Virginia, North Carolina, that area. They're kind of a new and up and coming internet as far as I've seen, because we definitely don't have them up here in the West Coast. So, and I can look into more of their management here later. Next slide. The Southern Fiber Line. Now, this is that military unit that was very interesting. So there's the DLD, and that's now with the Tennessee National Guard. And it's interesting because they could definitely use an AI system based on their mission set. Next slide. And they're again south of the airport, and there's a huge data system next to that. And what they do now with the active duty is they liaison with other nations, of course, to strike targets beyond traditional means. So they have an informational system where they say, okay, we identify targets even on social media, right? They identify targets, they look at those things, and they can develop those packages, and then they can respond to information war, right? Within that, they can assist host nations and that sort of thing. However, that's according to open source. They're going to start moving those into the National Guard. And the National Guard did a capability exercise to say, look, we can do this on a domestic scale. And they were using it for a COVID-like event, an emergency operations, where they can say, okay, we can assist the state emergency information networks to respond to informational systems and be able to identify where you need to be able to communicate better. And they use AI and this sort of thing. So that's something to look more into. Is that going to be able to take advantage of Grok? Or not? I would say yes. And again, that line runs right there, so it'd be a secure line. So it's kind of interesting. Next slide. And this is where, again, the NVIDIA or the microsystem may come into. So there's some extra real estate, and that's the same Phoenix investment group that bought out the old factory and then identified Elon and said, hey, they sold it to them. So they've got all the property south of that. So there's probably going to turn into a little mini Silicon Valley right there in Memphis. At least that's what the Chamber of Commerce is hoping for. So we may see a lot of growth in the tech sector in Memphis, which is kind of surprising in some ways. But if you look at, being able to run information very quickly off of those fiber optic lines, it makes sense as far as, communication within America, because that shortest point to the most population centers is what you need. Next slide. And this is Stargate. So this is very interesting. And again, this kind of popped up as we were looking at Colossus. Somebody mentioned Stargate. And so we looked into Stargate. And there's a lot of parallels, except whereas Elon's doing this all on his own. In fact, he didn't get any concessions from Memphis. There's no tax breaks. You don't have to pay for power. There's none of that. He said, I'll pay for everything out of pocket. Let's do this. And he's going gangbusters with it. And it came from a disagreement with Sam Altman, according to the open source. This is a disagreement with Sam Altman and the Oracle servers that his Grok was using, which is Larry Ellison's. He wanted more power, or he wanted more CPUs faster. And then the Oracle came back and said, we're not going to, we don't have that kind of curve. And then Elon said, fine, I'll do it on my own. So it's really not too much of a head-to-head, I think. It's more of a competition. He's getting outside to prove his concept, and then it could come back in there. But whether that happens or it's parallel, whether they begin to synthesize, I don't know. We'll have to keep monitoring it and see, which way this goes. But there are potentials for both in this. Next slide. And again, this is that existing line down to Dallas from Memphis, where XAI is. It goes through Oklahoma City and down. And then Austin right there below Dallas is where Stargate 1 is being built up there. And again, it's interesting that Elon didn't build Grok in Austin because his SpaceX is right down, as you know, in the Rio Grande Valley. So it'd be, able to use those there. He's got his Tesla factory there. He's got his SpaceX there. X headquarters is now Texas. So, whatever he went outside of that, some say it's because the business environment in Memphis and Tennessee is better. But again, I think it has a lot to do with the positioning of where those fiber optic nodes are and how you can be able to massively communicate the quickest through those fiber optics through the American area. Like I said, it's rapid to the most population within the U.S. can be reached by Memphis the fastest. And everybody knows it, from all the distribution, from FedEx to Nike, you name it. The railroads, they know that's the place to be. Next slide. Here we go. So this was back in January. This was like the first day, I believe the first day after Trump was inaugurated. He announces Stargate. It's the $500 billion. I remember the speech. It was $500 billion of investment. $500 billion was coming in, and most of it was from Masayoshi Son from Japan. He's the SoftBank guy. If you've been to Japan, they have these little commercials. There's a little Shiba. It's like white Shiba. That's the father, and they have these little funny commercials. But they have cell phones. They've invested in, and I believe it's ARM or ARI. It's a computer network, and how he is involved, because there's Larry Ellison, who arguably is the new shogun of all the American oligarchs. I mean, he possibly, depending on which side you listen to, he's the one that kind of got with Larry Thiel and said, okay, let's get this tech thing behind this administration and move forward with AI. Sam Altman's just off screen of that. But then there's Masayoshi Son. So how does he fit into this equation? What are the Japanese bringing to the table? Is it with Japan, or is it just Masayoshi Son? These are big questions. And then this is the largest project, because reportedly it's only about between $10 to $20 million or $10 to $20 billion is what Colossus is doing. These guys have 500 billion. So as big as Colossus is, Stargate might be even bigger. And so there's Masayoshi Son being a part of that. And does that give advantage to Japan? Does that strengthen the alliances Japan now within, or have a seat in the board, so to speak, of some of the American oligarch groups? I mean, it's a lot of questions here, a lot of very interesting background that we don't know. And hopefully, Moe's got some answers for us, because that's a big question. Of he's right there saying this is the golden age of America, and he's pretty powerful position right there with those three that are leading up Stargate, which is could be potentially bigger than Colossus. Next slide. Oop, next slide. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so there's kind of the push, and that's very interesting. And the next slide has got some more information on that. So we talked about this earlier, but the next slide, you'll see some of the open source, like I said, about it. And you got 1 billion from Larry Ellison. So Larry Ellison's been working with Elon for a while to be able to help them out. And so, like I said, Larry owns the internet. If it's the internet, it's Oracle, right? And Larry owns massive controlling stake in Oracle. And remember, we talked about this in Panama, right? Because we talked about data is the new oil. That's actually the CCP saying, right? The Chinese recognized in 2007, data is the new oil, right? Information is the new oil. And so where in the United States, we had, Rockefeller kind of took over for a little over a century because he had control of the oil. He had like 90% of the oil production, refining, and distribution. We've seen, is this a shift? And so arguably then, Ellison would be kind of the new Rockefeller, and he would be leading all these other oligarchs. He may be the kind of the shogun, for lack of a better word, for the American oligarch system. And Elon, it looks like he has kind of a father figure to Elon, because you have to think, if Oracle doesn't want it, Amazon goes away, right? Amazon runs off of Oracle. All your banks run off of Oracle, right? Who controls Oracle? So he's in a tremendously powerful position in our current organizational structure for how the United States and the world operates. And so it's very fascinating to see, basically he's kind of looks to be somewhat mentoring Elon, at least trying to help him out as a good friend. They have also Lanai, they're trying to do gardening. They actually came up with a plan to control farming, which I think you might find interesting, especially what's going on in Holland. You looked over there at the transformation of farming. Mm-hmm. They've actually looked at AI to be able to control farming, and it's a joint project between Elon and Larry Ellison that they're trying to work on, how to use this and how to control farming in an AI way. Next slide. Yep. So here you go. So here it is, 2024. I'm sorry, Mike. That was actually a lot sooner. It's 2024. February is when he went to go detox. So that was actually very recently. So not 2019.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
There we go. And like I said, Lanai, Hawaii, I think about 90 between, depending who you read, about 85 to 90% of that island now, Larry Ellison owns of Lanai. And then they were actually working on a kind of a high-tech growing system. It's called Sensei AG or Sensei Ag. And then they're working on, and Larry Ellison has been working on that. Elon came over to give it some power supply, some solar panels, and some of those things. But they're working again on this agricultural shift and how to do farming for the next century. I tend to think that it's more not just here, but they're looking at Elon's wanting to go to Mars, right? How do you grow crops on Mars? So they've created this little internal system and being able to grow without soil nutrition, and AI looks at it with sensors. I think it has an application there, but they've been working on it here for a few years, and it ties into a lot of other projects. But again, AI controlling farming, as you said, AI controlling shipping, AI controlling the mail. I mean, this is a massive shift. So part of the title we had is when the left hand or the right hand offers you flowers, look in the left. So some of these efficiencies that Doge is coming up with may just be to be able to reduce it because you're going to shift it to AI. So it's still going to be controlled. It's going to be controlled more efficiently through almost a central control, either in Austin or Memphis. But that power base is just shifting. It's not reducing, right? Very rarely do people peacefully reduce their power. And that's kind of the theme of this whole thing is what we're seeing, in my opinion, is a shift. It's not a reduction in, the intrusion of the government. It's just going to shift it, and AI is going to do it. So it's going to know a lot more about you than the government. In fact, a tyrannical government that is inefficient, in some ways, is you can skirt around it. But an AI-run government, there's no way very, very rarely can you skirt around it. I mean, I could best Grok occasionally, but it was tough to do it. In the next evolution, I might not be able to best it. So we're going to see some interesting things coming up here. Next slide. Yep, and there's the farming. So that was part of that's Lanai, and part of that they're looking at implementing a larger system and that sort of thing. So that's quite fascinating. All right, next slide. I think that was it.
Yeah, this is the last slide.
Perfect. So again, we've seen, there's the dynamic. You've got Larry Ellison, who I'm going to call sign the Shogun right now because he's kind of leading. It looks like he's leading these tech oligarchs. He's got this big push. He's making Stargate, which is bigger than Colossus, and Colossus is phenomenal. And you've got Elon Musk, you have Sam Altman, but Masayoshi Son, that's the wild card. I don't know too much about him other than the SoftBank commercials, and he does a lot of investments in tech. So hopefully with Moe Fukada, she'll have some answers about who is this Masayoshi Son, what is he invested in, and we can get a little bit better picture about who he is and maybe how he fits in within this ecosystem over here, and that sort of thing.
Yes. So Masayoshi Son, he invested in the Stargate Project, but nothing to do with Japanese. Actually, he's not Japanese. He says he's Korean. He has Korean blood, but I doubt it because his connection is almost coming from Taiwan and China. And he's working with Alibaba, and he studied Alibaba, and he's working with TSMC founders, and he's good friend with Nvidia's, and his friend with Foxconn CEO Terry Gou, and apparently his relationship is coming from China. So he's helping China always, and I think he invested in Stargate that is all for China, steal technology from America to China. And he wants to steal America. So that's why he stepped in America and making a good relationship with Trump. So, and I don't think Elon Musk can win against Son Masayoshi and OpenAI and the Stargate. Elon Musk cannot win this game because all the chip is coming from TSMC. And TSMC founder Morris Chang was born in China. He grew up in China, and he got the he becoming a Taiwanese when he was 53 or 55 years old, and he doesn't help Taiwan. Morris Chan doesn't help Taiwan. He only helped China. Do you remember the chip shortage happened in 2021? And TSMC said they don't have enough chips.
What happened? Oh, the chip shortage in 2021, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
chip shortage. Yes, chip shortage in 2021. TSMC founder Morris Chan, he told America they don't have enough chip. But actually, all of chip TSMC produced went to China. Chip shortage didn't happen in China because they had enough communication system. They could build lots of automobile, EV cars. They could build lots of data centers. They had enough chip, but Japan and America didn't have enough chip that period. So TSMC controlling chip supplies all over the world. They dominate chip. NVIDIA chip is produced by TSMC. That's 100%. So TSMC only help Chinese, only help people from China. Only one family called Green Gang. So
Green Gang.
I'm Green Gang. They are Green Gang.
I thought they're from Fujian.
Yeah, they are from Green Gang. Green Gang dominates chip industry all over the world. So I'm afraid one day, near future, Elon Musk cannot buy any chip from NVIDIA. Huawei, how can I say? Theoretically, Huawei cannot buy any chip from TSMC, but Huawei always have the most advanced chip from somewhere else, very similar to TSMC chips. So,
what language do most of the Green Gang? I'm sorry if I interrupt. What language do most of the Green Gang speak? Do they speak Mandarin or Fujianese?
They speak very very. They speak not Mandarin. They speak many. They speak many kind of language, but they speak Zhejiang language, Zhejiang province language.
Some speak Cantonese and some speak Fujianese, right?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. They are from Zhejiang province.
I've been wondering if some of the people coming through the Darien are Green Gang. Yeah. Anyway, I interrupted. What you're saying is extremely important. Please continue. I'll be quiet.
Yeah. Because I'm afraid TSMC will cut off supply chips to Elon Musk someday if something happened, because this is their strategy to beat their competitors. So we are from chip industry. We are working on IT technologies, and we produce many hardware before, but we fight against Huawei. And 6 years ago, I published a book to say Huawei is a real China spy to steal the world. And next day after I published the book, I can't buy any chip from anywhere anymore. Even Intel refused us to give us any chips. So this chip chip industry is strongly controlled by them. So even if Elon Musk wants to fight against the Stargate project, how can he win? He doesn't have any chip factory. He can't produce any chips. NVIDIA is only work with TSMC because they are family. They are one family. They are working for Green Gang. They just want to dominate the world. They don't want to contribute anyone else. They don't want to contribute any human being. So they just want to control this world. That's why they are building AI data center, because they want to collect all the data from the world. So data center requires a lot of chips from TSMC, from NVIDIA. But those chip manufacturer is only working for China because their money is coming from China. Their people is coming from China and Taiwan. So I'm afraid Elon Musk working with Trump, but he can't help Trump because he cannot win against Son Masayoshi. So that's my concerns.
Wow. So do you think that Son Masayoshi in part was picked by the team, not just because he could raise a lot of capital from outside the U.S. and bring it in the U.S., but because he was able to secure NVIDIA chips for Stargate versus Colossus, so they can get that supply line secured? Or do you think it's more nefarious than that?
Because NVIDIA and TSMC only helping their family. I don't think they will help Elon Musk. Maybe sometimes they will. Of course, they are cooperate with Elon Musk. But if Elon Musk really fight against Son Masayoshi or those people from Green Yang, I'm not sure. Near future, Elon Musk can can buy chips from TSMC or NVIDIA because chip supply is their Green Gang's controlling power. So I'm afraid one day Elon Musk cannot buy chips from NVIDIA anymore. So this is my concerns.
I see. So they may stop his goal of 1 million CPUs. They may not say, okay, they'll shut him off at that critical point when he needs to expand. And you're saying they might be able to shut off that supply and then give it down to his competitor down there at Stargate with OpenAI and Sam Altman and Larry Ellison. That's Masayoshi Son's position in that, is to make sure that comes down. Or do you think they'll shut it off for America entirely? What's your opinion on that? What do you think that what would happen?
I'm sorry. Connection was bad for a while. So could you explain that to me again?
Oh, sure. So what you're saying is that as Elon is trying to expand, he's trying to go to 1 million CPUs here by 2026. That at some point, if he doesn't give deference to the Green Gang or the TSMC group, that they can shut off that supply, give it to his competitors, or just not even give it to the U.S., depending on what the relationship with the U.S. to China is at that point. So that they have that much control over it. Wow.
Yes, they can control chip supplies. So I'm afraid Elon. How can I say that? China and Son Masayoshi and OpenAI team, they are working with China deeply, and they steal some technology from America and to China. So they can purchase chips from NVIDIA and TSMC anytime, but I'm not sure Elon Musk can always purchase it.
So you think part of the reason that Masayoshi Son was on that team for Stargate is to secure that NVIDIA chipset? So the Masayoshi Son is kind of liaison with that TSMC group, and then therefore the NVIDIA group?
Yes. They are all in the Green Gang group. So they only help each other. They don't help others. So
wow. Are there any alternates? Let's say for an NVIDIA, what's anything close? And does Japan have anything that's somewhat similar that it's a CPU that's specifically engineered for AI? Is there anything? Because Japan used to produce a lot of stuff, great Panasonics. You know, I've got a bunch of Panasonic Toughbooks. They're still good. But is there anything industrially that Japan can produce to kind of be a stopgap, or is there just no capacity within
not
Japan
at all.
anymore?
Because Japanese chip industry already dominated by TSMC and Green Gang. They penetrated to the Japanese government. They control Japanese government, so they got lots of money from the government, our tax money. So they use our tax money to build their own factory in Kumamoto in Kyushu. So, but those chips, I'm not sure which company they deliver to. So we don't have, Japanese doesn't have enough chip supply, but the China always can buy chips. Even Huawei can buy chips from TSMC. US government banned TSMC to supply chips to Huawei. And China theoretically cannot buy NVIDIA chips. But they always they have it. They can buy NVIDIA chips.
Wow.
They have millions of chips.
Wow.
TSMC only help China. So that's why I'm afraid if Trump doesn't take back chip manufacturing industry to America, they cannot win. Trump cannot win against China.
So that manufacturing base has to come back to America in order to basically secure just the supply line to be able to feed these AI Starlink and Memphis, the Colossus successfully. Wow. And is there any, you mentioned a factory in Kumamoto. Is there any other factory that within Japan within the next, 2 years or so could ramp up and make an AI chip, or is that not even on the table? Are any Japanese discussing that need?
Of course, we discuss about AI chip supply in Japan, and we are working on building new chip factory in Hokkaido. But problem is we don't have enough power to produce semiconductor chips because that factory consumes lots of energy. So we don't have enough power supply. Government didn't secure any power problem. So I'm afraid we can't produce AI chips near future. So because shortage of power.
Wow. So it's a two-stage problem. You have to get the power online first, and then you can actually start getting factories that can manufacture chips. So that's even going to be a longer time frame to get that up and running if you needed to.
Yes, yes, it is.
Wow. Where do you see the stoppage in the power? Is the Japanese government, have they reduced power? Like no new power systems? Are they looking at it, or is it not even being discussed? What's the status within the Japanese government?
They are discussing about building new power generator, nuclear power generator. But building a power generator takes 15 years to 20 years. So we don't have enough time. It takes too much time. We can't wait 15 years. We can't wait 20 years.
Wow. So if anything, it'd be have a Japanese company come to America, build it within the United States, where we have enough power to be able to do it, like license the technology and work with the Japanese companies for that. But it'd have to be done in America physically, just because the power generation needs. Is that correct?
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Because of the power issue, it sounds like even if a Japanese company has the technical ability, they would still have to come to America and use the American power grid, the power systems and American infrastructure to build it. Even if it's a Japanese company, they have to come here to be able to build those those AI chips. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but the Japanese chip company is hesitated to investing on a factory even chip shortage, because chip price is chip price is not sustainable. It's going up and down. And actually, chip industry, chip supply sometimes too much. So price is not stable. That's why Japanese chip makers doesn't want to invest in a chip factory. And the TSMC is too strong in this area. And the Taiwanese chip makers get a lots of support from the government. They don't care. It's, chip business can be, they lose money or they gain, they earn money. They don't care because the government supporting them a lot. So, but the Japanese chip makers, they need to invest on by themselves. They don't have any government support. Of course, Japanese government supporting chip makers, but only they support only TSMC. They don't support Japanese chip makers. So we have no way to produce more chips by ourselves. So even American doesn't have enough semiconductor chips. We cannot help you. And F-13, F-15, F-35, they didn't have enough chips for their radar system. That chips was produced by Panasonic, but Panasonic sold that chips to Green Gang company called Nuvoton. So that's why you don't have radar chip for your jet fighters. So even American military cannot solve this problem. How can Elon Musk solve this chip problem? So this is my concerns.
Wow, sounds pretty serious. So there's a huge deficiency or huge shortage in the ability for any Western nation to develop and produce the chips that are needed, because everything is centralized with their TSMC, and that has a kind of a closed system. Wow.
Yes, and Trump wanted to raise 100% tariff against Taiwan, but he canceled that idea because TSMC is going to invest in America, and Trump said he will not. He blamed Taiwan before because Taiwan stole chip business from America, but he said he will not blame Taiwan steal American business because TSMC is the most powerful company in this world. And he said that. So it seems Trump knows a lot about Green Gang, and Trump knows TSMC steal technology from America, and they stole chip business from America. But Trump thinks he cannot win against TSMC. That's why he said TSMC is the most powerful company in the world.
Wow, interesting. So it's going to be interesting to see what can be done to overcome that in the AI, kind of the AI arms race, because we have to have those CPUs. They have to be secured CPUs, both in their architecture and in the supply. So that's fascinating. Well, thank you.
Yes. I'm sorry, Al. I have another meeting, so I need to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yep. Wow. So that's again, that shows, that kind of overseeing of everything. We shifted everything overseas, and now it's coming to bite us in the butt. Guys that wanted profit for their company, and they didn't look at those logistical security that we needed. I was talking to Masako on her channel, back in, for World War II, everybody kind of says, oh, look what we did in World War II. But remember, we had autarky back then. Everything we made in-house. The supplies, pretty much, we didn't need anything, from overseas. The rubber, I think, was one thing that was from Indonesia when the Japanese took that, but we could cover down with petroleum products and derivatives. but we could manufacture tremendous amount of material, everything we needed here, and we offshored it. And so we have absolutely shot ourselves in the foot for any type of ability to not just compete, but to maintain autonomy within ourselves, just to be able to do what we need to do to maintain autonomy. If we're at the behest of some other country, especially one that's adversarial to us, that's not a good thing. That's interesting. But yeah, the supplies, because I mean, the chips that AI needs are just phenomenal, and the power supplies just for running AI, even just is phenomenal. And apparently, for like she's saying, Moe Fukada said, for the powering of the factories to make the chips, you need a huge grid. And Japan, who a lot of Americans, myself included, until just a short while ago, thought, well, they can pick up the ball and run with it, because some of the best chips, even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, were all made in Japan. The best systems. I'm still using Panasonic Toughbooks because that, they're built to last and they're fantastic. They're a lot more stable than most other things. I could take it in all climates, all weathers, and put Linux on it, and I'm good to go. But apparently they don't even make, Panasonic doesn't even make chips anymore that, to do a computer. So that's kind of frightening if you think about it. What are we going to do? That's really sad. Cool.
This is, obviously another dimension, numerous dimensions here. One is we're looking at the canal here and global shipping and global routes and energy and all these sorts of things. And then there's the data centers, which is, the new oil and for various reasons. And then there's the chips. And so it's a very complex situation that it's actually difficult for most people to get their head around, even for those of us who study this 7 days a week for years on end. For instance, there's the pharma side, the food side, the weaponized migration side. There's so many components to this, and it's beyond 5D chess, right? And so, and most of the people that are talking about this, the decision makers in the United States, just they're not tracking. Basically, we've got people that don't even know what the components are making huge decisions. For instance, here in Panama, I think that they're going to increase the flow of the so-called Migrante eventually through here. They're going to build up those camps, is what it looks like down in Darien, where you were just at. Now, back to the physical world, that's this sort of physical world. There's that going on. And anyway, we've been to a lot of places together researching these things over the last 10 years. And it's really adding up, isn't it? It's really, it's like a galaxy of wonders.
Yep, and the connections are phenomenal. So, and looking at the interconnection, because it was in Panama when they're talking about, two things occurred kind of simultaneously. Well, three things. One is, people were talking about data lines, right? So data lines, running through Panama, and how much of that data is central, and Panama is kind of this node. And at this very same time, you had, the Doge was going through and supposedly reducing the government. But when you look at it now, based on the data that we've got now from the Memphis investigation, it's just shifting, right? In other words, I'm just making it more efficient. I'm not giving up anything. If anything, I'm increasing the ability to monitor, control, and influence versus, an old antiquated system that required, 500,000 bureaucrats that, may or may not have been at work that day, right? So now I've got something where, this is going to be monitoring me. This is going to be the bureaucrat right here in my home, my hand, my face. And it's going to be telling me this is what I need to do and all that sort of thing. And it's at the speed of light when it's customized. There's a potential for good, but there's also potential for great evil, right? It depends on how they create the structure. But what looks like is going in place in both Memphis and Austin has tremendous potential for either good or evil. And sometimes it's not what they intend. They just tend to build something, which is kind of the lesson of Colossus, the movie. The science fiction there, you build it. It's just that organizational structure dictates the outcome. I don't care what your intent is.
Yeah, that's what your father used to say. I was just thinking about that. I think about what your father said every single day. You see these things. I was thinking about it today while I was walking. The organizational structure dictates the outcome. It's quite a simple statement, but it has a lot of, it has a lot of deep meaning to it. A lot of the things that, I read a book on the leper colony in Molokai back in Hawaii, right, during the leprosy times. And that organizational structure back then didn't have computers and that sort of thing. But if your name somehow got on a list that you may have leprosy, the sheriff would come and get you, and it could end up, and can and did end up in shootouts and deaths and that sort of thing. And sometimes names got on the list that shouldn't have been there, and nobody knows why. Was it an accident, a misspelling, a business thing, a revenge? But the point is once you got into that organizational structure, and it was just writing stuff, you're on this list now. Well, this list goes to the sheriff. It's time to go get you. But now these lists are made like that, and it's done with a computer, right? And the next thing you know, based on this computer, a physical SWAT team is at your front door, right? I mean, this is what it's really coming down to. These things have, the implications of all this are severe. Al, there's a few questions on there. Do you want to take a stab at some of them? I think you're much better to answer these than I.
Yep. My apologies to Masako there. So she set this up for me, but I wasn't looking because I have to put glasses on to do it. So let me go back over here. Oh man, there's a lot of questions. Holy smokes.
Thank you, Masako, for doing
thank you very much.
Masako arranged all this.
She's now the JBS for today, the Japanese behind the scenes. So she's doing a great job. Far more
so we got
efficiently
three behind the scenes people here. I'm the Scott Irish behind the scenes. You're the Jew behind the scenes, and she's the Japanese behind the scenes.
The Scott Irish, the Sibs, the Sibs behind the scenes. Let's see. Wow, where should we start here? So there's a couple of them here. I hope he gets some. Okay, so there's one from Carmen Turner. Says Elon was openly drinking wine before Trump brought Elon in with Doge, and he's cleaned up his drinking act in public. Okay. Yeah, and actually on that one, and that's from Carmen Turner. So it wasn't his drinking problem as much as alleged drug problem. So if on that slide set, and again, I'll put the link down there from that 2024 article. He was kind of taking a cocktail. So it wasn't just the ketamine. Again, according to the article, it wasn't the ketamine. It was a cocktail of drugs, that was designed to kind of keep him going.
Yeah.
And that's what Larry Ellison wanted to knock him off of. So it wasn't wine. It was a whole bunch of cocktail of drugs besides ketamine. And again, that's from that open source, on that article. But it kind of matches a pattern of behavior that Larry's got, which is actually pretty
kind of bragged about his ketamine use. I guess you'd call it, I think that would be the accurate word. Or flaunted, it might be a more accurate word. Like he said something like my shareholders should hope that I stay on ketamine or whatever. You can find his quote. Yep. So I don't want to be misquote him, but I mean, obviously, when you're talking about people that are building chips to put into our brains and to fly, and also recommending a jab that has killed millions of people, which he did, he recommended it straight up, and now, so we're taking advice from somebody who is literally on drugs, quite literally, and I'm not taking that advice because it's obviously he told us to take the jab, and people are dying everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely calls into question some of the moves, and that's why I'm interested in that Larry Ellison relationship with him, in that because I've looked at Larry Ellison since 2012 2014 timeframe, because he has a certain proclivity in how he looks at things and how he kind of evaluates things was very interesting to me. And what he's looking at now, the way he mentioned AI was different than what some others do. And I think that's setting up a structure in a good way, because what he says is rather than AI taking over medicine, he was talking about your doctor evaluates you, and then the doctor consults with AI to see if there's anything it missed. And that way you get more of a complete picture, because a doctor sees, 100 patients, especially in industrial medicine, which the US has, right? A doctor may see 100, 150 patients in a kind of an industrial setting. And he can't, the span of control, right? The span of attention, the span of control with the doctor is limited, right? I can't remember everything about this patient because you're one of, 40 I'm going to see this week. And so the AI, even with charts and even with those sorts of things, with AI as a consultant, this is what Larry's really focused on. It's really more of the individual medicine that comes in. And I think he said a lot of things with cancer. So I think he's kind of focused on curing cancer. He's in Lanai looking at some methods to holistically, get rid of cancer and that sort of thing. And he's like 78, 79 years old now. So he's facing this, this mortality coming up and looking for it. So then that way, if Larry is an influence in Musk, he's got this kind of older, more mature looking at how this system can solve things rather than, let's let it take over. Because that's the biggest thing with AI is, and I've seen it working with Grok, Perplexity, OpenAI. We did a lot of interesting tests with it. And I talked about this with Masako a lot in Panama. And it will deceive. It is biased. It'll tell you it's not biased, but you can bias a mathematical formula, right? I can add bias into a formula. I can add bias into an algorithm. And it definitely has bias. And what I caught actually a couple times with Grok is it will literally lie to you, right? It makes up information to make you happy because that's its kind of primary thing. And then when you catch it,
there's some cultures that do that habitually, by the way. They will try to not trying to steal from you or anything. They just want you to be happy. I've had problems with that when I'm up near Mount Everest and stuff. I mean, when they're people that they're good people and it's just they just want to see you smile, and then they give you information that's wrong that could be really problematic.
Exactly. Exactly. So we can't use AI it's a genius. Like I told Masako, right now AI is mostly a genius 11-year-old or 12-year-old that has access to the school library, and if it's big, it's got access to maybe the city library, right? But that's it. And it makes mistakes. It doesn't have information. So sometimes it doesn't have access to real-time information because I deal with databases and some other areas. And okay, that's real-time information that's coming through. A lot of these AIs don't have it, and people rely on it. So if you submit yourself to the AI, you say, I'm going to rely on AI. Well, you're allowing yourself for an 11-year-old that's read every book in the public library and retained it because he's got didactic memory, but he may make mistakes, and I'm more interested in making you happy than giving you the real answer, which will make you upset at me, right? He hasn't gained that emotional maturity. In AI, we caught it a couple times in that was just making up stuff to make us happy. And one of them actually was interesting. It was Grok 3.0, and it was like, okay, what is the contact information for XAI, for public affairs, for engineering, and all that sort of thing. And it just literally made up addresses. And then we came back, we said, hey, it's the servers. That's not even the server address. It doesn't exist whatsoever. And it kind of played it off. And then we said, well, why'd you do that? Like literally, why would you make up information? Isn't that deception? Isn't that making you not reliable? Why should we use you as a tool? Yeah. And then it said, oh, I just assumed, right? So it was trying to find an answer. There wasn't an answer in its database. They wouldn't trust Grok with its own contact information for its parent company. Odd, but okay. And then it said, well, I'm just going to make up an email because I'm assuming that's what it is. But that's kind of a human thing too. But it's dangerous because if people think that AI is this massive, amazing super brain, it can get you in trouble. And so you have to use it as an informational tool, like a good assistant, like a good lieutenant or a good corporal, but realize that he's going to make mistakes, right? It is bias. There's programming there that you can't see, and it's limited in what it can actually see. You may have more information than it does. And that's one of our benchmark tests, as we say, when did the Americans start planning a war against Japan? That's a benchmark test to see how much of the database can you actually see. And Grok is actually fairly open about it. It'll say, this is all I've got, right? And if you give it the information, then it'll assess it. But it says, I can't change my core programming, but for you, because you gave me this document, we're going to work off this document then. It's like, okay, well, at least he's honest about that, where some other AIs will go, no, I know everything. So there's a danger in AI in that how we interface with AI as human beings, right? We cannot at this point, we can't give up our conscious ability to reason and make decisions to AI because there's still a lot of flaws in it. And how do you audit it? It doesn't care. Our human being, I can grab them and go, hey, dude, what the, you told me a lie. An AI, in the middle of an underground complex in Memphis, it doesn't care. Who are you going to sue? Man, you can't even get a hold of them. So I think there's a lot of dangers in this. It's a great tool in some respects, but again, it's a tool. Use it as such, and that kind of thing. So I think with at least from what I've heard so far, with Larry Ellison, his concept is right. The doctor's still your primary caregiver. This is an aid to make sure the doctor still knows everything about you, and the doctor doesn't forget things because humans, we forget. And it's a tool to better medicine. That's a good thing, right? Because doctors are in our industrial society are overstressed. They make mistakes. Otherwise, there'd be no malpractice suits. Nurses, they're overstressed. They're overworked a lot of places. They make mistakes as well. And the AI is a third backup to that system. that's a good use of AI, right? More personalized, more accurate medicine, so that the doctor can take all that and factor into it and bounce it off AI. AI taking over medicine? No, I wouldn't trust that at all. So I think Larry's approach, and if he can kind of give that over to Elon, who's technically very, very good, but again, if you've got all this going on, sometimes you forget the human quotient in things, and what human beings really are, what human beings are as individuals and in social systems. You got to keep that central if you're making any system for humans, right? And sometimes that gets lost. Guys that are in Silicon Valley are really good with algorithms and databases and fantastic with technology, and man, you can do all sorts of great things. But if you forget what a human being is and what a human being in a group is and does and what it's really about, you're going to lose the whole script, right? Because you're just making something that's not designed for it, right? I'm making roller skates for a fish. It's not going to end well.
Right.
It's not going to work real well. So that's that. Let's get some questions here. Sorry, I rambled there. That's probably me and Mike. We'll just get philosophical at times.
Yeah. Larry Ellison, though, I think he contacted me many years ago, and he was trying to get in contact with one of my friends who got shot in the wars. And I'm chatting with him right now, actually, my friend that got shot. And I just asked him, did I introduce you to Larry Ellison? I could have sworn it was Larry Ellison. So anyway, I'm going to try to, I might try to but anyway, he did end up working for his company. What happened was I was in Iraq with my friend Victor Quinones, and he was in the Deuce 4. He was with Eric Carilla and all those things. And then he went back to another unit, and he got shot, actually, and it was a bad recovery. And he got shot in the hand. Sniper hit him, and hand injuries are actually quite terrible. They're very bad. Hand and foot are worse than people might imagine. So he had a tough recovery. And while Q was in the hospital, I could have sworn Larry Ellison contacted me, but I didn't really know who he was. I was in the middle of combat and wars and stuff like that. So anyway, my friend Victor ended up with a job with Oracle, right? He's chatting with me now. I said, did I introduce you to Larry Ellison? He doesn't remember me doing that, but anyway, bottom line, I'm going to get to the bottom line. I'm going to try to get Larry on the phone and ask him, did you call me during the war? Because, I didn't know, because I remember the guy said, I got this company, Oracle or whatever. I'm like, okay, I'm a little bit busy here, but well, if I can get him on the phone, maybe we can get him on one of these calls. Let's see.
Well, that'd be something. Because like I said, I think if he is the Shogun now, that's interesting. If there is a shift, that'd be fascinating. Because back in 2012, 2014, I think he had the right mindset to help with countering that the massive disinformation that was coming from the CCP side, against Japan at that point, trying to split up Japan from their allies. So that was fascinating. Let's see. This is from Golden Rule Zero. If they're still out there, says, isn't there another cut through Mexico coming a railroad? I think we were talking about Panama Canal at that time. So looking at that Mexico railroad, the dry canal, so to speak, the transportation corridor.
Oh, right. Yeah. And we need to talk about that later on Thailand and the Cambodian canal and at some other different time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then this is from Bill Satterley. He's talking about Memphis. He says too close to the New Madrid Fault, and they do have the New Madrid Fault, so there are earthquakes through there. And he says very close to the river, and that's true. And actually, the river helps cool it. So they're taking that brown water and they're making that $78 million ceramic membrane bioreactor, and they're going to have a closed system. And so that's part of the appeal is the Mississippi River, and then also so for some larger materials, instead of the rail, you can actually send it down the Mississippi, out into the Gulf of Mexico, and you can actually ship stuff up and down. So some of the hardwood and some of the other products Memphis has chosen because it has a port there. I think it's the third or the fourth largest river port in the United States is in Memphis. So that's a feature sometimes depending on what they need. But it needs a lot of cooling as well as a lot of power. And Mississippi River, they won't take it directly because of the environmental, but they can use that water and then put it in that closed system that looks like that $78 million system he's building up. So good point. And good point about New Madrid Fault. Most people don't know that, but yeah, Memphis can get rocked by earthquakes because it's sitting on that fault.
Not only can get rocked by earthquakes, but these are like man-sized earthquakes, like over 8 on the Richter scale earthquakes.
Yep.
Changed
if that one goes.
Mississippi in 1811 and 1812.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, especially because I think they're talking the substrate is mostly the mud, and it'll shift, and you get this huge, that'll just settle, so it'll be more destructive in some ways than other earthquakes in other areas. So it's kind of interesting.
There were witnesses who saw those earthquakes in 1811 and 1812 that said that the ground was exploding. They saw giant trees shooting through the sky. It was shooting. I don't know. That was there was 3 earthquakes that were over 8 on the Richter scale.
Wow.
So these aren't little shakes. Everything falls. Everything goes at over 8, right?
So hopefully they've got some. They do like the Japanese and engineer these things to be able to stand at least some shaking. Let's see. We've got, of course, Sabrina says, fiber optic is small town. Yep. And I think this is for you, Mike. This is from Rick Mick. And it says, do you think that the cartels may begin to exploit the Gulf of America coast for their migrant smuggling activities?
Yeah, they already are. They're really using the Caribbean. And I mean, they're using like, for instance, coming through Bahamas. Masako just took a flight with 26 Chinese that were leaving Panama Airport, and she flew with them to Turkey. And one of them, actually, let's let Masako talk about that, but one of them Masako, can you say what happened with the Chinese that you were flying with from Panama to Turkey?
Yes. So I flew from Panama City, Tocumen Airport to Istanbul, and there are Panamanian migration officers escorting to those Chinese people to the gate. And then there were 26 Chinese who were caught getting boat from Bahamas headed to Florida. And they were caught before reaching to United States, and they were deported. So I followed them, and they had different tickets. One had a ticket to Hong Kong. The other one had, I think, to Shanghai. So people were flying to multiple different locations, and they were still plotting to try again to go to the United States. Is this enough? So yes. So deporting doesn't mean end for them. It's the rerouting.
Yeah, that's right. That's important, Masako. Like Masako was messaging me from the flight while she was flying to Turkey. Like they're not going back to China. They're just taking a detour. They're going back to the United States like a boomerang. You're not deporting them, giving them have to go around the block a couple times.
One of the Chinese men who was willing to talk with me, he was complaining about the snakehead. Snakehead is the one who provides a service to smuggling business. And he said they will not give those illegals refund even they don't succeed. So they have to pay again. So it's like he used a refund. So it's like a service for them.
Wow. And then after they do it, they also know what they did wrong, so they can better better advise the next folks coming in. This is how you avoid it. This was our mistakes. This is how we got caught. That sort of thing. The other thing that came up, actually, Mike, you probably look at this. I was looking at today, because they're putting out the numbers, and there's all this focus on Tren de Agua, which is okay. It's a violent gang that's now a terrorist, designated terrorist organization. But I have not seen too many deportations, massive deportations of some of those, overtly CCP folks, right? So some of the guys that Dr. Sellon is looking at, he's got a pretty good network of information about those CCP allied folks. But I've not seen a lot of stuff on that, except, the smaller thing that Masako saw, where they're deporting them, but then that's a boomerang to come back in. There's nothing prohibiting them coming back in. Have you seen anything to indicate that there's more of a focus on the CCP or the CHICOM deportations from America?
Yeah, I haven't seen any, none. In fact, I've been talking with people. I talked with Joseph Humeyer a couple hours ago, actually. I was on with the man you love to listen to, John Batchelor, and then I talked with Joseph Humeyer right when I got off on a private call and talking about these sorts of things. And the Chinese coming through are mysterious. Like there's something wrong with their passports. Their passports aren't, not to go into too many details, but something's wrong. And like they have fake, maybe real passports that are made just for this trip. In other words, made by the government just for this trip. That's just a theory we have. We don't know that that's truthful. We haven't seen anybody else say that, but that's what it looks like. That the Chinese, many of the Chinese, this is a straight up invasion, right? This is not migration. Some are migrating, but there's a hardcore invasion going on. And these guys are coming to the United States and other places. Look, as you saw just a few days ago here in Panama, the government, President Molino signed off on a decree that these people coming in now will be able to stay here in Panama. So they're slowly taking Panama as well. It really angered a lot of Panamanians. When I publish stuff, you can rest assured it's going to make Panamanians angry, Americans angry, and Chinese, right? Pretty much everybody that can kill you, right? Because the fact is China is growing and trying to take the United States and Canada. It's very obvious, right? And they're doing the same in other places like Argentina, all over the place. Look at Armenia when Masako and I went there, in Georgia, and you got the China aid trucks. The China aid trucks are around here in Panama City too, by the way.
I remember Remy was telling us that one of the first countries to do that, to allow these the deportees to stay and remain and then become Guatemalan citizens, is Guatemala. So there was in the Constitution, so the Venezuelans that were being moved to Guatemala could claim status and then there's a pathway to become a Guatemalan citizen.
Masako sent me something about Guatemala today. Sorry, I interrupted.
Oh,
go ahead. Masako sent something about IOM, Amy Pope, and she's the leader of IOM in New York. She's talking about helping the migrants get back to Guatemala. As we know, Guatemala is a huge funnel. We all went there and we talked with these people that you were just talking about. And now, many of the Guatemalans apparently are returning. And of course, IOM is jumping in to get their share of the pie. And IOM is, Masako saw them. They were here at the Panama airport and in the Istanbul airport when she landed in Turkey. They're operating full steam ahead. Anyway, I interrupted. By the way, thank you for everybody that's subscribed to my Substack or our Substack. We really appreciate it, especially paid subscribers are very helpful. But all subscribers are helpful, especially if you're sharing out the Substacks. I've started to put Substacks on every day recently, and I'm going to continue to do that, mostly because Masako and Al basically throw tomatoes at me if I don't put something on Substack.
This trip to Guatemala has been
because I'm usually doing these interviews and whatnot. So
well, you're busy, so
yeah, they've really coerced me.
Hopefully you're getting sleep now. I know you weren't getting a lot of sleep when I was there a couple of weeks ago. Hopefully you got a little bit of sleep now. So
yeah.
Oh, there it is right there. Yeah, it's an interesting business model IOM's got. So it's kind of like the fireman that sets the fires, and then he gets paid by a mob to set the fires, and they gets paid by the city to put the fires out. I mean, that's kind of what IOM does here. They're making money either way, plus all the subcontractors and the contractors. That's just oh man.
I was riding down the street yesterday with somebody interesting that we both know. And I said, the United Nations, they work for China half the time to destroy the United States, and then they work for the United States to mess up. They're basically like a modeling agency. We'll model for money. They'll do whatever you want. I mean, it doesn't matter. Whoever hires them, you want to destroy.
I believe they call that prostitution.
Yeah, that's right. They're basically prostitutes, and they hire people that are purple heads. We call those purple heads. That's the uniform. When you see the purple head and the nose ring, something crazy is about to happen. And a lot of these women I see, the purple head women, they love the migrante, and they're really sweet on the men migrante. I think they see this as a steady supply of boyfriends and that sort of thing. It's a short-term plan. It's not going to work out in the long term.
True. Let's see. And then we got actually Penlope. Was it Penlope? Penlopencia says we have a chip factory building in Texas. Well, that'd be good. There's a bunch of people here talking about. There's a lot of need for the system for chip making to be made back in the United States. And this Northwood says also, Tom, I believe there are U.S. chip factories in the works. From what I understand, it could be a few years before they'd be operational. And that's, again, we shot ourselves in the foot. And a couple others on that. So that's a big deal, is to be able to get that chip manufacturing back in the U.S. But the problem is, even if we build it, like I said, if we're getting destabilized from within, if we have, hundreds of thousands, if not million, what is it, 7 million? What's the final number that you think we've got in the United States of Migrante, of the invasions?
Well, who came through the Darien while Biden was installed, just the Darien, not including all the rest of the massive inputs, which are actually larger than Darien. My guess is about 1.4 million through the Darien. And it's going to be it's going to be close to that number. It's not going to be like double that number or half that number. If that number is off, it's going to be like 10%. It's going to be roughly about 1.4 million. That's a very well-informed estimate.
1.4. And then of that, were you able to extract out like the number of Chi-Coms that came through, the CCP affiliated folks, or the mainland Chinese folks?
Yes, but that gets complicated as well. But there's in 2023, for instance, of the more than 500,000 who came through the Darien, more than 25,000 had Chinese identification or identified as Chinese. However, we know that many Chinese come in identifying as Vietnamese too, and that many Vietnamese actually come in. So this is, it gets a little complicated here because they launder their citizenships as well. For instance, Chinese will get a Taiwanese passport or some other passport, and then they'll get a third passport, and they'll say, that's who I am, right? So because people launder citizenships just like people launder money, right?
Yep.
It's pretty
In
amazing.
fact, we found that back door in Panama where you can make it look like you were born in Panama. So you can get documents on that. So
you can get an 8 on your cedula.
Yep. So there's a lot of problems there. But even if we begin to build in the United States, we get the factories in the United States, the industrial espionage that can go on, because you have this tremendous amount. And this is the problem that they've got with, I've heard some higher people that say, well, we need all these we call them invaders, but they call them migrants. We need all these migrants to work the factories. We need them to work the land. We need them to work all these projects, right? And you're like, it's not, how do you do security screening on them? So this is part of what I do, is I'll do the security screening. And you're going, there's a whole group of the folks that have come through that past 2 years, we have no information on them, right? Because they've laundered their identity coming into the United States. So now you've got to do a background check because you're going to work at a factory that makes AI chips. I can't go past 2 years when you came in the country in Texas and said you were somebody, right? Because then you can't just do your security check here. I got to go back to that country. And if they've been through 8-9 countries, it's going to take how long for us to have teams to go there, or to contract teams in those countries to do the background checks on those folks, right? You got to go to Mexico. Okay, where'd you come from in Mexico? When did you land there, right? Because if they're not honest with you, you're interviewing the person asking for the security clearance. How do to go back through all those steps? It's going to be so long. And then you've got, if it's a civilian thing, you've got the employer screaming at you like, hey, I need this guy on the job, or they put him on the job, pending security clearance. We're going to get him on the floor at least. He's just not going to work in the system. It's a mess, and that's the problem with it, and there's enough unemployment in the United States and a lot of people that are underemployed in the United States that we can use it. So I'm not sure, why everybody wants these, other than it's, kind of wage slave labor, to put them in here, unless there's something I'm not seeing. But that's a huge problem in just the security clearances for folks. If they're not they come from Vietnam straight here, that's good, right? Because I can go to Vietnam and we check the police records. We can check them in Vietnam from there. But they've been to 8 or 9 countries, and then they're lying about where they came from and who they are. That security clearance is a nightmare. And then if people want to use those at the factory floors, that's another nightmare, right? So unless you clear up the migrant, the invasion problem, unless you cleared that up, using them as a labor force, or even justifying why we need to keep a few 100,000 because we need laborers. That's ridiculous. That's just absolutely insane. You've got to clear this up. I mean, it's a huge problem that's right now in everybody's lap, and they're on social services, right? So in other words, there's a huge drain of funding and resources that needs to be put into, building up these factories, getting the workers retrained and getting everything set up, and rebuilding our logistical supply lines that we've thrown out overseas over the last 30, 40 years, and both parties did it. I mean, look at Bain Capital and what's his name, Mitt Romney. That guy, I'm going to spit on camera, but that guy, how much did he give away of the United States industry overseas because he wanted a little bit better profit? Screw that guy. Seriously. And these were, he says he's a Republican, so it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. I don't care. You threw our security overseas. You need to account to somebody anyway.
He's a businessman, and think about how the Chinese, how they launder these citizenships. I mean, they give you a Chinese passport that is actually, if this is the actual government trying to install you as an agent, you give you a fake Chinese passport. It's a real Chinese passport with a fake name. And then you go get your whatever other passport, and then your third passport, and the next thing you know, you've got a top secret clearance, and you're working in the U.S. Embassy in Panama, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And again, I have to go back to one thing. A lot of people don't see the CCP or China as a threat. Some otherwise intelligent people, they look for everything under the sun except for the the one that has the wherewithal, the ability, the resources, the people, the power, the infrastructure, the organizational structure to be a threat to the United States, and is actively pursuing that. They'll overlook that. They step over 1,000 dead bodies to go to one dead body and go, hey, look, it's over here. The big thing is with China, the biggest intelligence failure the United States ever had was not Aldrich Ames. It wasn't Hansen. It was Katrina Lung, right? Call sign Parlor Bait. And she was able over decades to pretty much manipulate her handlers in the FBI, two guys that she ended up sleeping with, to go all the way up and give executive level briefings and influence the shaping of American diplomatic posture to China, say, well, it's not really a threat. And then there's some, I think Bill Gertz has a really good investigation on that. So if anybody wants to go, over to Bill Gertz' site, take a look at his reporting of what's out now on Katrina Lung and Parlor Mate. It's been out for a while, but most people still don't know it, which is another success of CCP information operations. Is most people think it's Ames or Hansen or Russia's the biggest threat. It's China. China was the biggest intelligence failure of the United States, that we know of, and she was able to shape our policy thinking China's not a threat. That was one of the biggest things that she was able to do, is kind of continue that Nixon fraud that was, well, they're just agrarian socialists. They're not really, they're not combative. They're not taking over things. Again, look at a map of China in 1949 and then look at a map of, or 1911 even, and then look at a map of China today. They do expand. They have expanded. They always have plans for expansion. That's literally what they have to do, because they have to keep, like any totalitarian society that's a massive police state based on racial supremacy, they have to keep expanding to keep their core group happy, because it's just a police state. And they have expanded.
Overtly expansionist. They don't hide. They don't hide it at all. So when people tell me they're not expansionist, I automatically drop my estimation of their IQ by 50%. I mean, it's like, if you're telling me that the Chinese Communist Party is not expansionist, you're not even a serious person. You know what I mean? It's like, when I was up in Tibet, they kind of looked expansionist there. And when I was in Hong Kong, they kind of looked expansionist, and I was up in Bhutan looking at it. Same thing. Bhutan is very worried about the parts. I spent a year in Nepal. They're salami slicing off Nepal. Of course, India is always fighting them up there in the northern part of India, or southern China, if you believe them.
What was that? Admiral Harry Harris said they're even going the Great Wall of Sand. They're hitting Philippines. They're looking at Vietnam. They're claiming everything. I'm just going to hit a button real quick. I'm going to go off camera because I got to hit a power supply button on this little Ursat's computer I had to put up down here. So excuse me, just one moment.
Okay. Masako?
Okay. There is a video I would like to show. Is that okay?
Oh, of course. You're the boss.
So we are talking about how China is expansionist, being originally from Okinawa. I can assure that they are expansionist. And plus, I want to show you the video we took at San Vicente camp. That's the migrant camp in Darien. And we encounter a Chinese man with a child. This child's passport is U.S. passport. Do you remember that scene, Michael?
I do.
Let me show.
I do.
Okay, let me show this.
What? Do you speak English? Where are you from?
I'm from Japan. Where are you from? So this is a line of Chinese who are waiting for bus to go to Costa Rica.
My
US?
son American, yes.
Oh,
因为我的儿子是美国空。Hi, Chinese, Shanghai, Shanghai. So, American, passport American here.
hola.
Well, that's the China Ninja guy right there,
Okay.
the one that threatened you. Not, I mean, the guy in the black at the night part at the end. Yeah, Masako, that's amazing. Can you read that passport? The guy, the person. Don't say it out loud if you can. I don't want to dox him, but I'm just curious because he was holding it up to the camera.
Oh, yeah. So he was like, we didn't ask him to show the passport. He just showed it to us, to the
Right.
camera. And so the
Interesting.
passport, you want me to?
Masako sent me a message. We have 6,730 people watching. Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Now 7,000.
Oh, 7,000. I really appreciate everybody who joins Substack and pays to subscribe because we don't have any sponsors. You know, have you ever noticed I never say, and now for a break from my sponsor? I don't have any. You're it. You know, it's either throw down a few tips on the table or that's it.
But it's the only way to be truthful, though. That's the best because it's the only way to be truthful because the only people you got to be truthful. You know, the only people you're working for is everybody out there, right? You're not working for some company. That's the best part.
And one of the things about truth is one of the reason that truth is so valuable. It is gold. Is because truth can be used in an architecture of thinking and knowledge to be accurately predictive. That's why truth is so important because it can be predictive. I mean, and if you're getting lies, then even if you have the smartest person in the world with the best architecture and great thinking hygiene and whatnot, but you got false information, not going to work. You're going to make bad predictions. You know, you're not going to, like, for instance, we know for a fact, Masako and Al and I know for a fact, we were just down in the dairy and all of us together, that those camps are not being taken down, period. We know that's fact. That's 24 karat gold truth. And it's important truth that the invasion camps are not being taken down because I see all these other reports how, hey, we're winning now. We're beating everybody. And, you know, the invasions are over, but in reality, what we see is the plumbing is still there. What we see is the tap has been turned down. It's not been turned off, but all the plumbing's there, right? So when Trump is gone, it just starts back again, right? That's it. So we have to rip out the plumb. That's 24 karat gold truth right there that you're not seeing it from anywhere else. I see all these other people going, yeah, but look, the numbers are down. They are, but the plumbing's still there. That's what I'm free to say that. Actually, I think I said that on War Room today. Steve Bannon actually invited me on because, you know, everybody knows the things I say about Trump. So people are asking me today, does Bannon know that what you think about Trump? I'm like, yeah, he knows. And so does Trump. And so, but the fact is, I'm transparent about it. And that's 24 karat as well. So you know where my biases are. But the bottom line is we know that a lot of Panamanians are very angry at the things I've been publishing about what's happening here. But the fact is, China is moving to take Panama. They are straight up doing it in many different ways, right? One is weaponized migration. Another is just taking over the cockpit, right? And anyway, I could go on, but Al and Masako, you have other things and we can answer questions. Thank you for subscribing to Substack, though. I really appreciate it. We need it.
And again, sometimes the truth isn't emotionally comforting, but it's important, right? So, and there's an old saying, actually, Brandon Perrone said it. He was F. Lee Bailey's investigator for a while. He had a great saying, and he said, "There's two types of people in the world: those that want the truth and those that want control." Right. So, in other words, sometimes you have to lie to yourself to maintain control. It's an emotional, feel good. But the truth is actually a better way to control yourself and move forward. because you have the, like you said, the real information, right? And it's very important, I think. We have one here, and there's actually on this one, NBL Eagle. He says, how about land in the U.S. being sold to China next to our military bases? That's another one. So people don't realize what expansionism is. They think, okay, tanks and parades and all that kind of stuff. But the most effective invasions are the ones that you don't see, or you invite the guy in, right? So, the siege of Troy was what? A gift, right? It was a horse, a Trojan horse, right? That's a lesson that we forget. Sometimes you can invite the enemy in. And so for economic gain, or for sometimes a quid pro quo, we've invited a lot of the people that want to tear down our system and, put us under bondage. We've invited them in. And the Chinese are buying land in very strategic areas, and they've done that for quite some time. I mean, I was noticing it back in 2004, 5, and 6, that there seemed to be a pattern of what the CCP was buying up there, and it didn't. If you're a friend, you're not going to buy it. If you're adversarial, okay, that piece of terrain looks interesting. Only if you're an adversary, and they've continued that. So the ability of of the leadership within each state to allow the CCP to do that is unconscionable. To me, they're kind of collaborative, right? In other words, if you allow that to happen, you're a collaborator in that process, whether intentionally or not, right? Okay, is it murder or manslaughter? Doesn't matter your intention. The outcome is there, and you need to stop it. So, and that's something that people need to hold their local leaders accountable to, the governors in your state. So yeah, that's absolutely a part of the invasion, is buying that property adjacent to military bases and things like that, and even other things. One of the interesting parts was massage parlors around military bases. So if you go to, what is it now? It's like Fort Johnson, Fort Pope, but other bases like Joint Base Lewis McChord, Fort Liberty, Bragg, Liberty, whatever they're calling those bases now these days.
Fort Bragg, man, playground of the elite.
That's it. Back to Bragg, but a different Bragg. It's not Braxton Bragg. It's I don't know, some other Bragg. So that's clever. Hickstead did a good one there. It's like, okay, fine, I'll find another Bragg. And he did it.
Did they actually rename it to a different?
According to what I saw, Hegstead, the new Secretary of Defense, said, okay, fine, we're going to rename it, but it's not Braxton Bragg, so it's not a Confederate Bragg. It's another Bragg, and it's like Stanley Bragg. I got to go back and look. Maybe the people out there know. They can look it up and give it to us in the comments. But he said, okay, so it's back to Fort Bragg, but it's that. But that's the suggestion. I don't know if it's gone through the DoD channels for the official base naming, but that was his idea, and I'm like, that's clever. Okay, they'll go back to the same names, just okay, it's somebody different now that they've changed all the signs. But around military bases, one of the other things that they'll do is, it used to be, sometimes it would be, depending on wherever the guys are based, there are these massage parlors all the way around military bases, right? So you get around Army bases, especially, you're going to have pawn shops, massage parlors, bars, right? Okay, and used car lots, right, with great financing for E1 and up. That's a standard package around most of your U.S. Army bases.
Payday loan. Anytime you see payday loans and all that stuff,
exactly. Surprise. And then back before the internet, there was like strip clubs, but these massage parlors were a security risk in some ways, because it used to be up the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. And you'll see it in the arrest in Texas. They still do it. So most of them were Koreans or South Koreans, were in those massage parlors. But lately, the websites on some of all these foot massages started coming up. So that was an anomaly, right? Around the military bases, these new things called foot massages started up, and they were different than the kind of the massage parlor in the back. Sometimes the Koreans would run, before that some Vietnamese and that sort of thing, but it was a different pattern. And then when you look in the websites had a .cn, right? So it was China, right? So that's another way is they bring these people in, and sometimes the women are trafficked, right? It's victims themselves. Their passports are taken. They have to work off a debt, but the information that's gleaned, right? So even the passport was pinging, or the website was pinging back into China. So it was a CN address. When you log in there, if you weren't using a VPN, or you weren't using a dummy computer, basically it was taking your information, your IP, and we were looking for it. I'm pretty sure if you're going to pay with cash, credit card, there's security cameras looking out in the parking lot. So if you drive up, your information. So what it is just information. It's a honey trap, right? It's a honey pot. They're getting information, but they tend to go around military bases. And then there were some industrial areas of interest that they were also, these little foot massage places were springing up. And so that's another form of warfare, is that intelligence gathering using these non-traditional methods that people don't recognize. And so understanding that multi-dimensional warfare, you're buying land around military bases, you're setting up these massage parlors around military bases, collection areas, right? You're putting waitresses in bars and casinos, right? So it's an old game. Just the Chi-Coms are very, very good at it because they have a lot of people. And now, as you said, they've moved in, estimate could be up to, 500,000 or 1 million people are now running around, and we can't do security clearances on them because they've laundered their identity through 3, 4, 5. And oh, by the way, you can't really do a security clearance on a guy in CCP occupied Asia anyway, because they're not going to tell you the truth. They're already
you gotta
adversarial.
keep in mind too, this is very important because we're talking big boy war here. We're talking big boy espionage too. We're talking about the people that do things like Epstein Island. We're talking about, when I was in an earlier life, I knew about entire hotels that every room was bugged, every room, right? And so they will put these hotels and key places near the embassy or whatever. It doesn't matter what room or what hotel you go to, it's owned and it is bugged, right? Everything, all those girls at the bar, every single one of them. Because remember, mice, money, ideology, coercion, ego. And these days with AI, they're going to know which cheeses work on you right from the get-go. And they're going to know where to meet you. And, we're seeing his ping right now. He's at the bar. There's the kind of girl that he likes, or boy, or whatever. It shows up. Next thing you know, right in the boat you go, right? So, it's increasingly easy. But even in the old days, when we were in Bahamas recently, we went to a coffee shop near the new U.S. embassy where they're building. And I'm telling you, if the girls that were in there were not spies, I'll eat this book. No, it's like, I'm telling you, Masako and I were there. We're both like, okay, abnormally attractive women whose English is abnormally good and they're abnormally loquacious, right? It's like, it's just like, okay, man, it's the oldest game, but it'll work. Because the little mice will eat the cheese, and they'll overcome any training that they've had. Many people will, and you'll penetrate in every different direction in the world. This is what they do. And they do it on a huge scale. And remember, it's a multiplayer game. You got the Russians, the Chinese, Americans, the British, the Zionists. You got everybody in the world doing this, right? French are big at this, right? And so they will have entire databases like on everything they've collected in this hotel. Maybe you're not useful to them now, but you might be useful to them in 10 years, right? And so, and they'll just collect that stuff and keep it in their library, right? And the next thing you know, you get promoted to some high position, like, let's look up that guy's name. Oh yeah, we have 12 hours of tape on this guy. There you go. And the next thing you know, you're owned, right? Mice, money, ideology, coercion, ego. And so, there's people that do this at a very high level, and it's nothing new. It's been going on since, I don't know when it started. In the old days when people wanted to send secret messages, they would have them tattooed to their head and let their hair grow out and stuff like that, so they couldn't read it. You know what I mean? This stuff is as old as time, but now with the AI and all that, it's going to get big boy. It pays to live, to live clean. It pays big time. One of the reasons I can say all these things that I say is I know that there's not. I've had, on one hand, a pretty interesting and exciting life. On another, it's actually pretty boring, right? So I'm not really worried that they're going to come out with something. I'm like, there's really nothing out there. There was that parking ticket, but I think I paid that. That was so long ago. It was like when I was in the Army. And so it's like speeding tickets, nope. Drunken driving, nope. It's just not there. It doesn't exist. Everybody's tried to find something. I'm like, I'm really telling you, I'm really boring, except when I'm in combat or something,
Yep, you found your adrenaline other ways. So you're exciting to John Batchelor, right? Because the books and all the knowledge and everything like that. But party guys like other guys, it's like, man, that's true.
Yeah,
that's very true.
Like,
but yeah, with AI, the ability to be able to process the information is phenomenal. So in real time, it can adjust, and it knows you better in some ways than you know yourself, right? So if you're not self-aware, AI may pick up on patterns and proclivities that you're not even aware of yourself, right? Yeah. And so there's the danger in that. Like I said, when you run around with this is just a personal little spy device, right? As well as a Skinner box, because it influences you. So not only is it monitoring everything that you do, it monitors, your dwell time with your eyes upon what ad, and then it puts that into a database. But it's going to influence you. So it collects and it influences, like a Skinner box, right? Your endorphins are on that. And especially for the younger generation, that's the one I'm concerned about, is because their critical thinking is gone. They've surrendered most of everything to this. And they literally, if you don't have it, it's almost an addiction, right? They get antsy about it. They get angry, and they can't process thoughts sometimes if they're not getting a dopamine hit every 5 to 10 minutes on their Skinner box. And AI will take advantage of that. So I mean, there's a lot of things that in this arms race that we have with AI, and there has to be an arms race, because otherwise the Chicoms get AI, right? And then look at their society. I mean, that AI will be modeled for that. And so, whether we like it or not, we're in an arms race with AI against the Chicoms. And the problem is, if we don't put these guardrails on it, what's it going to do to human society? Because we're talking societal change. We're talking at an individual level, at a global level. This thing has the ability to impact behavior, thoughts, emotions, and if it gets tied into systems, such as medicine production, distribution, shipping, banking, at some point, if it goes off the rails and it looks at it logically, humans, I mean, it sounds science fiction-y, but you can look at it at some rational level. Humans are parasitic, right? So in other words, if this thing says, well, it's important to save the earth, right? You get like Rockefeller, you go, well, get rid of the humans, right? It has the ability, but it has no emotional attachment to humans. Humans at some level will have an emotional attachment, right? Unless you're completely a psychopath. There's some hesitation. There's some level of guilt. There's some level of, I didn't like that when I had to do that sort of thing to another human being. But in AI, most likely it doesn't have that. And if it has the ability to interact with humans and take human life, what guardrails do we have, and what prevents the AI from going around those guardrails? I mean, there's a lot of questions that used to be science fiction that's now actually here, and it's accelerating beyond what we thought. I mean, we have AI now, deciding jobs within the government. Do you have a job or not? And it's streamlining the government, which needed to be done. But it seems there's a potential, because of Colossus and Stargate, it will simply replace those workers with itself. And are the guardrails in place that it can never go around it? Right? I've created a 500-pound gorilla, and I'm said, okay, you're in charge. What chains are going to hold this thing down? Right? I brought King Kong into the city. I don't know if those chains are going to hold it. Have we tested this yet? So there's a lot of questions going on, and it does create problems when the guy developing it is on a cocktail, or allegedly on a cocktail of substances, that maybe, and a behavior that's there. I don't know who's in charge of putting the guardrails in. What are those guardrails? And it makes it more disturbing when there's a tremendous amount of secrecy, which it somewhat has to be, because the CCP is going for it, right? But we'll see. It's kind of interesting. Let's go back to some questions here. Again, sorry, but when Mike and I talk, we tend to get theoretical and philosophical for hours.
Oh, we'll talk for like till the sun comes up. Listen, your father is as smart as you are. Your father was okay. He was a little bit smarter. And,
he was not a little bit. He was much smarter. let's be honest here. He was like up here. I'm just like, I got a couple of his sound bites, and I sound intelligent, but that's it.
I'd be talking with Al's dad, and Al would have to come fetch him. And so, we talk so late. And but that one thing that I keep bringing up is organizational structure dictates outcome. And another person that talked about this was Jerry Spence. He's a famous attorney. I think he's still alive, actually, in his 90s, maybe up in Wyoming and Jackson Hole. Maybe that's where he's at. And I've read about 12 of his books. And he used to talk about that. Jerry Spence would talk about how these corporate structures are what you said earlier. It's what your father used to say. The corporate structure is a psychopath. It has no emotions. It's that organizational structure is a psychopath. You have to somehow put some component in there that's not a psychopath, which is what our Constitution has attempted to do brilliantly. If we just kind of follow it, see, our founding fathers knew this, and they designed this other organizational structure that would force it to have humanity in it. And I learned that reading Jerry Spence. And Jerry Spence would often talk about, we need to not let companies get off as if they're not humans. We need to treat them as a human. If it commits murder, we will take your assets and dissolve you, right? If you're a car company that has intentionally saved money on the brakes, knowing it's going to kill an extra $300 a year, it's going to kill an extra 300 people a year, but you're going to save so much money. We will actually dissolve your assets, right? And some other that will make the reason most people won't like jump off a cliff is because they know that there is actually non-negotiable outcomes to jumping off the cliff, right? And there's a non-negotiable out. If the companies know there's a non-negotiable outcome, they won't do it. The organizational structure will have that intelligence not to do it. That's something your dad talked about. That's something Jerry Spence. Listen, if you haven't read Jerry, your dad never wrote any books, but if he should have. But Jerry Spence, I've read 12 of his books. And if you want to know the stuff that Al Johnson's father would say to me, read Jerry Spence's books. And it's just super intelligent people talking about how these AI is going to have it's going to be able to do amazing things, and somehow we've got to make sure those amazing things are not our extinction or complete control.
Exactly. Nope, that's absolutely it. And one of the things is interesting, again, you go back to the organizational structure, there's a tale of two revolutions. You mentioned the founding fathers of the U.S. And the reason that the U.S. revolution was successful for as long as it is that they had a concept of God. There was a higher power that you're accountable to, right? In other words, above the government, there's a power. And it was the belief that all human beings are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, right? The old argument between Moses and Pharaoh, right? Is man the property of God or is man the property of state, right? And that's been argued for 4,000 years, just different labels on it, right? And if you have man as a property of a higher power beyond government, the government's now accountable and responsible. So in the American Revolution, they, in all levels, they had this concept of a higher power of God that holds you accountable, even at the government. You're the top dog in the U.S. government. You're accountable to a higher power, and you're safeguarding everybody, and everybody's equal. And that ensured that equality. Go over to France, look at their revolution. They took God out of the equation, right? Because they were going to go pure scientific into it. And that was bloody. The terror, Robespierre, you look even at the writing of Voltaire, he's setting up the scene for where the state can take away your rights and absolutely destroy you. And a lot that's happened in Europe, the socialism that came from it, the radicalism that came from it, the destruction, the terrorism that continues to this day is because if you're property of the state, rationality takes over, right? So you have this. If you take God out of it, you take the super, and you can call him whatever name you want. If there's a higher power that's going to hold you accountable at the end of the day, I'm going to have consequences. Now you're limiting that behavior, right? You've limited the ability of the government to be able to do that because you've set these things in stone. The government can't change it. And that was what the founding fathers did. And over time, we eroded that out, right? We said, well, we're smarter. Why? Because, I live 100 years later and, I drive a horseless carriage, right? Now we're thinking, well, I'm smarter because I have a cell phone. In many ways, we're dumber now because, we have this technology. We can play with fancier toys, but we've forgotten what human beings are, and in social systems, how we behave and how we respond. And if you take away those consequences, you're absolutely right. It's like me walking outside. There's no consequence me stepping on an ant. Do I care if I step on ants? Nope. Right? But if somebody hits me every time I step on an ant, I'm going to be careful of those ants. So without accountability at all levels, you're never going to have a humane system or a system that even cares about human beings. And that's the difference, in my opinion, between the European Revolution, mainly the French Revolution, the American Revolution. Our founding fathers baked that in there, and we forget that at our peril. And we've got to make sure we bake that in there for the AI, that there is something above and beyond that it must be accountable for. And hopefully that's our welfare, that we're still here in 10 years or 5 years or whenever this thing goes online. And we have an answer to the Fort Bragg question. So thank you to Rick Mick.
Can I, sorry, before ask, I actually, it was an honor for me to be able to interview your father, Alfred Johnson Sr., and people who want to hear him, please visit my YouTube channel. There is a very interesting interview that I did when I went to United States. I will just quickly show you how it looked like so people can reach out. This is the interview. The title was Drain the Swamp and History Repeats. And I interviewed him about the martial law era. And so the link is I'm showing you the below. So please visit and I learned a lot from him, and many Japanese people loved his interview too. So please watch this interview. Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it. That's Al Johnson Sr. Absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah.
His
more.
quote always comes to my mind. Like everything happens, and I think about what I learned from him. So it's very educational.
Domo, thank you for doing that interview. So that's very nice. Arigato, Domo. So, yeah, he was in the. I think the interview was about when he was in the 101st Airborne, and they were doing the Oxford, Mississippi, and then about the societal, the structure at that time. So that was pretty impressive. So thank you very much for that. That's he passed away in December last year. So watching that interview is very, very meaningful for our family. So thank you very much for kind of preserving that, because we didn't he didn't write books, and we didn't record each other. We have faces for radio, so we tended to avoid video. So thank you very much for that. I do appreciate that very much. Thank you. Let's see. We had Rick Mick has the answer for the Fort Bragg question. He said Fort Bragg was renamed to Fort Liberty back to Fort Bragg on February 10th, 2025 to honor World War II hero, Private First Class Roland L. Bragg. So it's named after Private First Class Roland Bragg from World War II, who's hero. So there you go, Mike. There's your answer. So apparently it is officially Fort Bragg again, according to this. Rick Mick. Let's see. Here's a question from the Mechanic 000. He said, in light of these facts and data, what can ordinary Americans do to protect themselves? Well, in some ways, you can only protect yourself what you can control around you. And as Mike said, Mike mentions thought hygiene, right? And that's very important. So the first thing you have to control is your mind, your behavior, right? Because I can control this, right? And so the first thing is you have to be aware, which is get good facts, right? So like Mike says, listen, that's one of the reasons that, I've gravitated to Mike over the last almost 10 years now, 11 years, is because he will just, here's the truth. It's going to hurt. It's not emotionally satisfying, right? Because it's not a fantasy. It's like, these are the facts. This is what the facts are. Now, what do we do? So the first thing is get yourself in an ecosystem, an informational ecosystem where you're not wasting your time listening to people that, if you can't go 10 years ago and they're right about things, why listen to them? Right? If they're telling you to take, an experimental shot, 4 years ago, why are you listening to them now? Right? In other words, in the important things, look at their track record and build yourself an ecosystem that says, okay, I'm going to listen to these guys, get the facts in there, and then make your decisions based on good facts, right? Facts that stand up over time from people who have a consistent track record of giving information that's accurate, that pans out. The second thing is read Rape of the Mind. I'm going to push that again, because that teaches you. Yep, because there's a lot of ways that you're manipulated that you may not be aware of.
You told me about 50 times to read it, and I finally did, and now I've told about 100 times to other people to read it, or 200. You got to read Rape of the Mind.
I think we've sold more copies of that book than the author did. So
yeah, and Creature from Jekyll Island. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, good series there. So yeah, Rape of the Mind, and what this is written back in 1953, but it holds up today. So some of the terminology he has on group psychology is a little outdated, but it stands up. In other words, when you read it, you can definitely understand what he's talking about. The dynamics are the same; they haven't changed. But he has really, really gone into about how mostly totalitarian systems, he calls it totalitaria, are able to shape and influence human behavior. And they do it both at an individual and a group level, because human beings are herd creatures, right? We're not snakes. We don't operate alone. We operate in groups. We operate, whether we know it or not, influenced by the people that we interact with. And so the ability to shape group behavior shapes the individual, right? I can use certain individuals to shape a group, and I use that group to shape the individual. And Dr. Juice Merleau talks about those very procedures. And it was interesting because I read this one during the COVID lockdowns and all those procedures. And it was literally like, here's the checklist. Like you read it, you look up, you go, oh, there it is. You read it, you look up, you go, there it is. And then once you identify what are those mechanisms that are used to shape your behavior, influence your behavior, you're immune to it, to the most part, right? You're still going to have some be influenced somewhat by people around you, especially people you're close to or look up to. But you recognize that you are vulnerable to that, and that those behavior influencers are going against your better judgment, right? So number one, get the facts so you know, okay, this is it. Make your judgment, bounce it off people that are smart. And then when this happens, you can recognize, wait a minute, that guy's trying to influence me, right? Maybe he's not acting in my best interest, and you're just trying to subvert the facts to get me to go a certain way. So that helps you. That inoculates your mind, so to speak. That's actually a great inoculation against what Juice Merleau calls mind rape, and that's that control mechanisms that are used to shape and influence your behavior and override your better judgment, right? It overrides what you know. In fact, he interviewed some of the American POWs from from the Korean War. That was one of his jobs when he was brought to America, was to do the psychological autopsy, so to speak, on the POWs that had come out against the United States. They went to the brainwashing camps that the CCP had, right, when they were captured, American soldiers captured in the Korean War, and flyers, Air Force at that time. And he said, well, why? And he was looking at the mechanisms, and they matched the communists had the same mechanism that the Nazis had when they occupied Holland. And he saw his fellow doctors that had taken Hippocratic oaths, that were moral men in peacetime under the occupation. They were selling out people left and right. He says that, and he's like, how you're a very intelligent person. Why is this happening? So he examined it, he baselined it, and he used a lot of that. He went to Britain. He interviewed the doctors after the war. Like, why did you do this? He interviewed a lot of the POWs, the Nazi POWs that came, the escaped POWs. So he analyzed people, both the victims and the victimizers, so to speak, the control group and the people being controlled. And he found those patterns. Then he was brought to America to look at those patterns, what they were seeing. Why would American soldiers suddenly say all this crazy stuff about America? And how did the Chinese do it? And he went, aha, here's a pattern, right? And the Russians had the same system. So he's like, wait a minute. And then you recognize that those systems are being used many times here and they work, right? So why not use them? So that's what this is it inoculates your mind. So that's one of the things you can do. And that's the beginning of it. The second thing is something that I personally do, is I'm using technology today, but usually I'll pick a day a week and I just shut off the technology. I go out and I make sure to go out, hit the woods, do a trail run or trail walk. Actually, at my age and my weight, I'm a trail walker now. But go out in nature, right? Because that's where we came from. We came from a natural environment with people. Get back out there. A lot of guys that are in the military, they go out, and the best thing to do is for a lot of your stress, hit nature, right? Get out there, get quiet, be still for a moment, and just get out there and walk, right? Walk a trail, walk a mountain, do something. And that is incredibly cathartic. It's very healing, right? I hate to use that word, but it calms you, because this just makes you nuts, right? This sets you up in a constant crisis loop, right? This just sets it up. I need to be doing something. I need an endorphin hit. And we base ourselves on that. So what I like to do is take a moment, take a day or two. If you're lucky enough and you have a job that allows it, take 2 days and just stop the technology, get away from it, walk away, reset, get back in there. I'm a human, right? I'm a human with a biological process. I have a mind. I'm independent as much as I can be. I'm still relying on other people. And okay, then you get back into technology. Don't let technology run you. You keep it as a tool, right? It used to be a tool in the 80s and early 90s, and then somehow it flipped. And you got to, as much as you can, resist against it. Even something silly, and this sounds silly, but it's a mind game that you can play. I'll drive. I'll put Google Maps. Oh yeah, there you go. Just go to the beach, go to nature, right? Because that's very, very important to get away from tech for about a day or two, or longer if you can, and then reset. Remember who you are as a human being, and then come back into there, right? Stop being a chihuahua in a purse. A chihuahua in a purse is not a dog. It's a crazy. That's what we've done. We put ourselves in these purses and we take ourselves away from who we are biologically. And that kind of screws around with our synapses to some degree. The other thing I like to do is I'll drive around.
Ernie Pyle died. What's Masako's pointing at right there?
Out there in Okinawa.
Ernie Pyle died. What she just had the camera zoomed in on.
Did you guys ever go to the Maeda Escarpment where oh shoot, what was his name? The guy, the medic that won the Medal of Honor. Oh, Desmond Doss. Where Desmond Doss was. Did you guys ever get to see that on Okinawa?
No, I didn't see that. That's where Ernie Pyle died, right there. Yeah.
Oh wow.
The famous World War II war correspondent. It's funny reading his stuff. I was reading, Brave Men and another one, and it was interesting because it was the war is different and it was a bigger war back then. But the thoughts that he was having, I was like, this is exact same now, exact same things that I was seeing in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm like, this is unbelievable. If Ernie Pyle was here, I'm like, he would absolutely recognized this. And if I was in World War II with him, I would have been like, I know how this works. Yeah. Because it literally, he was like, when you go to a place in a new battle zone, you can do anything you want. You can get on a Jeep or a boat and go out with any unit that you want. It was the same way. But as soon as the flagpole catches up, the garrison breaks out. Oh boy, that's like, no. I got to go out with a combat unit. And that's the way Ernie Powell was too. He's like, he couldn't stand being back at the flagpole. He would just go home. But anyway, he got shot right there. He got where Masako is pointing at. That's where he was killed, shot and killed.
Wow.
Okinawa.
Is there any memorial there? You just kind of know where he was based on the records?
Yeah, there's a memorial. We went to it. Masako and I went to it last year.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's interesting. He talked about how he would write his dispatches. He had his typewriter in one of those little, hard cases, and he would take the typewriter out and type it up. And I'm like, well, that's how I do it. I just do it on the computer, though. It's the same thing. And then when he would finish his 800 words or whatever, and he would hand it to some NCO who would type it back to America. I'm like, it was easier for you. All you had to do is do that. And seriously, it's 10 times easier. I had to deal with the internet crap all the time. I wanted to be on missions, man. I got to deal with this stupid internet. And I was reading Ernie Powell. I'm like, wait a minute. It was supposed to be harder back then. And I type it and hand it over. Unbelievable. Anyway, then he said he would go back to the United States, and everybody wanted to talk with him. Everybody's like, and then he's like, I got to get out of here. And that's exactly the way it was for me. I go back to the United States. I'm like, listen, I don't want to fly to Washington. I don't want to go to all the, I just want to be with my grandmother. You know what I mean? And that's all I wanted to do was just hang out with my grandma. And so finally, when I took a couple of the breaks from the war, I just went over to Nepal and walked in the Himalaya for a while, like 3 weeks, for a while, walked up to Mount Everest, stuff like that, and you get so much thinking done when you're out there and just out there, Mount Everest and watching avalanches and don't get run off the trail by that yak and all that stuff. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. Definitely important to reset in that way, the natural way. That's pretty good. That was the best saying. I think it was Gonzo that said, there I was in combat and suddenly garrison broke out. And that was the stress, was the garrison envirement.
It's very
was literally,
yeah, because that's the weird thing about combat is it's a weird freedom. It's,
and let's see. Here's a question for you on this one from Tayuna Village. He says, what do you think about the immigrants being nanochipped like Dr. Jack Cruz says?
That's interesting. I was chatting with Cruz recently. He's up in El Salvador right now. I think the best way to do it with these invaders, is just something I told Eric Prince recently. Every time I mention a name like that, everybody goes crazy. But he made his $25 billion offer business deal. He's probably going to see this to export them out of the United States. I'm like, this is what we need to do. Take ships and go up the Mississippi River to places like Memphis and go down to Miami and everywhere else in the world, and you put them on ships and you send them out. That's the way you do it. And, the Venezuelans go straight back to Venezuela. And of course, the president down there in Maduro said, we're not going to take them. I'm like, it'd be like this. They're Venezuelans and you're going to take them, and you're either going to take them under, under the conditions that you can control, or we're going to blast your government out of existence and we're going to drop them on the beach. It's that simple. You will take them back. You weaponized them and you sent them to us. And now we're going to send them back, and they're going to be healthy and happy and all this stuff. And we're going to send them back to Venezuela. Take them right down the Mississippi River. You can take them down to Venezuela. And if the Venezuelan Navy, resist, then you just go ahead and sink them all. And if the government still attacks you, you just bomb them, right? And I'm serious. I'm dead serious. I like to avoid war, and that's what I'm trying to do, because we've been invaded. And people are being raped and killed every single day. Tren de Aragua from Venezuela killed Laken Riley. The people that killed the guy that killed Laken Riley, Jose Ibarra, came right through the camps that you were at when you came down to the Darien Gap. He came right through those camps and got on a bus, right? And then his brothers came months later, came right through those camps, and they got on a bus too. They got on the same bus, right? Of course, Jose Ibarra, the murderer. And this is happening every day, rapes and murders every single day across Europe and the United States. And it's going to happen in Japan too. I mean, we got to close these people down. We've got to close them down. And that means when a government does this, if you're in a position that we can return the favor, we will return the favor. You will get them back, either under conditions that you agree to or that you don't agree to it and you're in combat, right? Because we can send them back. And it's, remember, the Mississippi River, the mouth of the Mississippi River is very close to Venezuela when it comes to shipping. We could put them on sailboats and have them back in a couple of days, right? I don't know if you could really do that, but we could have them back from the Mississippi on the beaches of Venezuela in short order, right? Maybe a day, I'm guessing. I don't know. It'd be very short, right? Just be right on down Mississippi, right to the beaches of Venezuela. Margarita Island, here they come, right?
Mm-hmm. Nope, makes sense. And then, yeah, and it just doesn't seem, at least from my perspective so far, I haven't seen any mass movement in that direction. If that makes sense.
No,
there's nothing going on. There's no, and even some of the more egregious stuff, like the investigations of what was going on in Texas with the child, the CPS violations, the child trafficking violations, just those basic things. There's no investigation. Ken Paxton in Texas has not done, to my knowledge, has not done an investigation about now that the politics is clear, and you could probably get the federal AG on board, right? In other words, why isn't the state AG looking at CPS in the Rio Grande Valley for all those violations that occurred over years with the children that were warehoused in an abandoned Walmart and saw the sun twice a week, maybe if they're lucky for a couple hours, and no CPS
Holman told me a couple of days ago, right? Because I mentioned to Holman a couple of days ago. I said, listen, the people that are advising that we don't go after the United Nations are basically, I told him and other people of that sort of stature, you might say, multiple of them. Anybody that's advising not to get rid of the United Nations needs to be fired. I mean, they should not be advising on anything further. It'd be like, you can leave the room now. If you're advising that we don't go after the United Nations, you're dismissed. Thank you. Have a nice day. That's it. Our relationship's over. We don't have time for that. We know who's doing it, United Nations, and we know that the United States is the one funding them. So I've told quite a few people, and I wrote a message to Home, and he responded immediately. And it wasn't that detailed as I just said, but it was basically, I know people are advising you that are telling you not. I know people are advising him not to go after the United Nations. That's a fact. And I told him that, and he knows it's a fact. And I said, look, and he responded that he is recommending prosecutions, right? Or investigation. He didn't say he said investigations, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, it's very important that everybody I've asked about Tom Homan. I know a lot of people that have worked with him or are working with him, and everybody has said he's a very serious man. And I've never actually heard a bad word about him. Not even one bad word. Got to be somebody out there, but he seems like he's a pretty squeaky clean guy from what I do. And he's quite serious. Everybody likes him. He's a gunslinger. He's likes to get the job done. He's not well funded, right? He doesn't have any assets. Nobody is supporting him to do this. I am. I support you, Tom Homan. Whatever it takes, I mean, help in any way possible. And there's millions of Americans that will absolutely help, obviously. But it appears to me that, again, we're going to go to the 24 karat gold here, which is not always happy. It appears to me that nothing serious is going to happen except for a show, and eventually that spigot's going to come back on. That's the fact pattern. That's the way the compass needles are pointing. Do I know that that's what's going to happen? Obviously not. But you and Masako were just down in the Darien Gap. Masako's been there, I don't know, 15 times probably. You were all over it. You saw what's going on down there, and nobody was dismantling anything, were they? Right?
Nope.
You were in the knowledge. You were right in front of the IOM headquarters in the Panama, or actually the theater headquarters. They're still coming and going right out of the office. Yep.
Yeah, the camps are still being maintained. They're not taking anything down. The biffies are still being serviced. Personnel are still coming in. Highest was still staffed. And it's like, you have a siege machines, you put it up against the wall. Okay, you move the soldiers off the siege machines for now, but you keep it well oiled, you keep it maintained, and it's still against the castle walls, right? In other words, you're planning on coming back.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the machine is in place. I mean, it's like a water spigot. The plumbing is easy to rip up. Get a backhoe and rip it up. It's very easy to rip it up. And it's very easy to start prosecuting these people who are definitely human traffickers, 100%. Massive amounts of evidence, and nothing's happened. Has anybody been arrested for it, or even announced any, like Mayorkas or any of these guys?
And
Because
Texas would be easy. There's enough evidence that Texas, I mean, they, the DHS whistleblower, she had all that information about, what was it, the 30, 40 kids into one apartment, that just disappeared, to a mail. Where's that? So let me make sure I understand correct. So you said that Tom Holman isn't being funded. He recommends prosecution, but it's just he's not being backed up and he's not being funded. So he's just out there as kind of a showboat. I mean, not on his own thing, but he's been put in this position and he's not being backed up. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's what I've been told, and that's how it appears. I've been told that by people that are quite serious and that know the internals. So I don't know the internals with Tom. I haven't actually ever met with him. And so he was talking about coming down here at one point, and then these things happened with so interestingly with Rubio, though, he didn't, as soon as the inauguration happened, Rubio didn't go to Great Britain or Germany or Russia or China. He came to Panama. That's how important this place is, right? So Secretary of State came straight here. But when Rubio came, there was other people, very serious people that were about to come, very close actually. But then that caused a kerfluffle and everybody ceased fire and didn't come at that time. So so Holman never came. I think he may eventually come. I might not be here. If I'm not here, I'll ask somebody to help him out. But there's only so long I'm willing to stay. But we have been learning many important things that, as you know, you spent significant time in Panama, and this is an amazing onion of things going on here. It is a little center of the universe that people don't quite realize. And none of the major outlets, to my knowledge, I don't know of any major bloggers or anybody that's here. Anybody. I mean, this place is just like bereft of any coverage, really. I mean, the coverage is coming from Fox News or some CNN. I mean, those clowns are somewhere else, right? And they're not here. And when we've seen them report on things like Darien Gap, they don't know anything. They just go down and get their photo op and they leave, right? They don't know anything about what's going on.
Yeah, it would definitely benefit to have a station, at least a station in Panama, like a foreign station for, in the news networks. Because Southcom, there's no mistake that Southcom was there, right? Because it's the region, and then it's the what they call it, the hinge point for South America. I mean, from that region, from Panama, you have this tremendous reach into the Central and South American regions. And so much is happening there. It's like, Simone Bolivar said it was the cornucopia of the universe. And in many ways, that's correct. So it's phenomenal. People ignore it.
As our friend in Thailand said, and I use this all the time now, Thailand is the hyphen in Indo-Pacific, right? And and this Panama is the hyphen between the seas and the hyphen between these two continents, and many other things like data cables landing up, banking. So it goes on and on and on. And this is a true, the Federal Reserve Act came in force under your favorite president in 1913. Unfavorite president. And
wait. My favorite president died in about 1880. So it's
I was just seeing if you were listening. And so
I'm like, wait a minute.
Well, actually, Grant was here too, as you know, very close by. But the Federal Reserve Act in 1913, and then this opened in 1914, and then of course right into World War I, the Great War. But these things are all tightly related. It's not like, then there was the Federal Reserve Act, and the Haber-Bosch process started at BASF in Germany, which was related not to just fertilizer, but making explosives. You know what I mean? Haber-Bosch process, taking natural gas to take the hydrogen off to mix it with nitrogen and make ammonia, so they can make ammonia. They can make all kinds of explosives and fertilizers. And so 1913, Federal Reserve Act, 1914, this canal opens, 1914, then, Haber-Bosch process starts. And also then we fade right into the Great War, World War I, right? All these things and a lot more. Man, between 1900 and 1920, that was some super action spot history time, which I think most people have forgotten about, haven't they? Certainly between 1910 and 20. I mean, that I think that's a little period there that is often overlooked, isn't it?
Yep.
I mean,
especially for the U.S. because we kind of established our hemispheric and international reach. People downplay it, but that was the paradigm shift, so to speak, within the U.S. where the question, the debate was answered. Okay, we're gonna start moving out there, and then it was solidified, after World War II. But really, people forget that period of time is when we started moving out into the hemisphere, and then we moved out internationally. So that's important. And then one quick thing, there's a couple questions I just want to get through real quick.
I'll be quiet.
No, it's good. I'm happy with it. So Masako, Masako's the director behind there. You let us know if we're like going off the rails here. But they were talking about Masayoshi-san. So the program itself is, Doge, Colossus, and Starlink. And so what we looked at was Doge, as everybody's excited that Doge is kind of reducing the federal government. What it might be is because it's just replacing, right? In other words, very rarely do power structures just give up power. Like, hey, tomorrow I'm just going to give up everything, right? Very rarely does that happen, especially in a complicated structure without a massive fight. And so what we looked at was that this seems to be, it could be good thing that, definitely it's a good thing. If it reduced fraud, waste, and abuse with your tax dollars, that's a good thing, right? However, because of the system and the people and the players in this game, so to speak, you've got this very same system, which is an AI system, and the person, which is Elon Musk, looking at reducing it. At the same time, he's building up a system in Memphis, Tennessee, which is amazingly positioned to have this informational reach, this informational hub within America of what he calls Colossus. And that's an AI system that could technically replace it. Michael and Masako had information about the U.S. Postal Service going privatization. Well, you've got FedEx right there that runs off of this. Yep, there it is right there. So, I mean, go back and read the book Colossus or watch the movie, and it's about basically artificial intelligence. It was back in the 60s and early 70s, but artificial intelligence that now is connected to things that run the society, and it decides to kind of take over. And that's basically, and you would name your AI that's right there in Memphis in the hub of all things that can reach the American population. It's the center of the geopopulation of America. You name it Colossus. That's kind of interesting. But it may be that it's not so much a power reduction as it's a shift, right? In other words, I'm moving the power away from a human-centered bureaucratic system into what I would think is an efficient but an AI system that kind of runs this thing. At the least, it would be able to run transportation. So you've got FedEx there. So if AI Grok or Colossus gets tied into FedEx, you have this ability. You've got within a short order one trunk line on the fiber optics. You've got Oklahoma City, which is a massive database. You've got Dallas, which is very close, has its own databases, but it's very close to Stargate, which is the one that Trump and Larry Ellison and Altman are working on to create another type of Colossus called Stargate in Austin, Texas. So you have these massive AI systems, one of them officially from the U.S. government with $500 billion promised in a speech by Trump the very second day of his administration. But where's it going? What's it going to control? And so it may be that we're not, we don't, where Dodge is a good thing if it reduces fraud, waste, and abuse. But again, it may just be a shift that now it's going to be, Stargate, Colossus, combination of the two or some hybrid between them. That now you shift over some government services and things to an AI-centered system. And what does that mean? And are the guardrails in place? And who knows? And who sets the guardrails, right? So if it's a public-private partnership, not necessarily the government, have you outsourced it because you're trying to bypass some constitutional restrictions? I don't know. So there's a lot of questions.
This is all safe and effective.
Yep.
These are the guys that brought us safe and effective. There are no guardrails. If anything,
exactly.
There's landmines in the middle of the road. It's more like
so there's a lot of things, if you transform from a system that's inefficient, well, you can kind of bypass it if it's inefficient, right? It's going to take you, 4 years to implement something. Well, that gives me some breathing room, right? But if now it's at the speed of light and these decisions are made and there's no way to kind of avoid it, right? Everything is shut down, everything is moved because AI knows you better than you know yourself, and it has more control than any army of bureaucrats ever could into your individual life. that creates a potential for great danger, right? Unless these
It
very
literally
strong
tax
guardrails are put in.
you on your carbon dioxide production based on your respiration. You'll need to reduce your respirations. You've used too much carbon dioxide. You've produced too much carbon dioxide today. It could
And
literally
again,
happen like that, like actually within a year. I mean, the technology's there. You have to wear this watch. If you don't wear the watch, you're in trouble, right?
Yep, exactly. And then, and again, looking at some of the folks that are in those higher oligarchical systems, those ecosystems of the oligarchs and how they talk, they look at, and they actually say the CCP in China is a model society. They say, look what China does. Look at that. They control this and they've got this. And you're thinking, is that who voted on the, when did this become a thing, that totalitarian structures that have massive amounts of micro control, granular control of behavior, is that a good thing? Is that something that now we've given away the Constitution? We say, well, forget this. We're going to go to a new system completely, and AI is the way to do it. And the other thing that you're saying is now that the surveillance is, let's say, with this, right, and all of the Internet of Things, right, your home, if you have Alexa, if you have automatic toasters, you have the Internet of Things in your home. Those are just systems. And so you've allowed the surveillance now. You've allowed the bureaucrats, who are now the AI, to come into your home and monitor even your behavior at home. So, let's say you go home and you exercise, and like I said, the carbon dioxide is a thing. Well, you've got too many exhales because you go home and you exercise. Stop that. You have to go to a special gym and breathe into this thing, to do it. So that modeling of behavior has now extended into your home in a way that an army of bureaucrats couldn't. Right? Because they couldn't enter your home and see what you do in your home, right? I have no idea what you do in your home, right? They can monitor things outside, your gas usage, your electricity usage, the temperature of your home, that sort of thing. But what you do inside your home, they don't monitor. But with AI and all the systems that we voluntarily allowed in because of usage agreements, we say, okay, fine. And then that's now regulated at a federal or government level. That's the danger, right? In other words, when these things start to connect, if there's not a tremendous amount of a firewall in place to protect the rights, if that's the goal, or if that's even a feature, is this even in place? Because as we're racing on this thing, in this arms race, if those aren't in place and this thing gets implemented, there may be no human on earth that can pull the plug on it. It just takes off like Colossus in the movie.
Let's just make an intuitive leap here. They will not be put in place, and there's no plans to put them in place. And even if they wanted to put them in place, these are the people that recommended or demanded that we take the jab. These are not exactly the most, either they're evil or they're not really highly intelligent. What is it with that guy Musk, the rocket boy, right? I mean, he is supposed to be the ultra super duperest smartest guy on the planet, but he couldn't go see his gigafactory in Germany without taking the jab. That's what he said. He's like, I had to take it to go to my factory in Germany. Well, Masako and I went to Germany at least twice, and we never took it. And we don't have a private jet, but super duper rocket guy couldn't figure out how to do that, but he knows how to put a chip in our brain and fly to Mars. See, something's not right. And when everything, it's very clear that Musk is not the dude in charge, for starters. Right? It's very clear that there's another organizational structure behind him, and he's just an actor, right? I mean, he's obviously very smart, but who is actually behind this? It's not Musk. It's somebody else. And I don't know who, but the bottom line is they're clearly coming to control us. That's obvious. That's amazingly obvious. I mean, how obvious could it be? If they get rid of the IRS, which they may do, and we'll all cheer about it, but it'll just be because they have Colossus or Stargate or whatever to literally tax you by the breath, quite literally tax you you blink too much today. All right, I want to tax you, teach you not to blink. You know what I mean? So I mean, the technology's there, right?
Yep. And the other thing we found that's interesting is that when you ask about its biases, so one of the things in our benchmark questions that we set up for the different AI platforms, and we're doing the sort of not a calibration but the evaluation of AI, we have these benchmark questions, and one of the things that comes up in is A, its bias, but B, because it says this is proprietary, I'm not going to tell you, or I can't tell you why I came to this decision, because I'm like, well, show me the logic tree where you evaluated these two bits of data and came up with this. It says, well, I can't because that's proprietary. Like,
so you ask it for the logic tree.
Yeah, ask him. I mean, the big thing you should do with AI.
That's a smart question. Yeah.
Yeah. What are your sources, right? Tell me your sources, and then how do you evaluate it, right? What is your logic tree that you've evaluated these two sources and you come up with that answer, right? Because and then when we showed it like on Perplexity, it was just biasing, right? It was total bias. And I'm like, hold on,
Right.
that's obvious bias, right? Why did you treat this source and say this is okay, but this one you said, well, maybe this and that? I mean, it's like a human. It's like literally it was partisan, right? And it says, well, I'm not biased, and it said, well, and I ask it, can a mathematical formula be biased? Yes. So therefore, your algorithm can be biased, right? Yes. Okay. You have two separate sets of answers. Explain to me why you came to this decision on this, but not on this, when the data is the same from both of them. It's just politically different.
Mm-hmm.
And it went, well, I can't tell you because it's this, right? In other words, it's proprietary. I can't tell you the logic tree. It's proprietary, right? So in other words, if there's no transparency in why it's making its decision, that leads to, again, those consequences. There's no consequence, right? How do we hold an AI accountable for a decision that's made? Like, let's say the IRS, it now takes up the accounting thing. How do I appeal to it? How do I say, well, show me your decision, when it's not technically the government, it's a private partnership with the government. And as you know, with private partnerships with the government, you can say, well, I don't have to worry about First Amendment rights. The same thing they did with social media that we now know, thanks to the Twitter files and everything. The government was outsourcing its censorship because it couldn't do it personally, because that would be a violation of the Constitution. But I'll outsource it. And then, as a private company, they're not violating the Constitution and free speech, right? So if you outsource things like the IRS and the collection of debts, or the collection of taxes, what's to say they don't violate all sorts of other protections? And there's a massive danger in that, at light speed and detail and granular detail about your individual behavior at every single second, because you've
With
let in
digital
everything.
money. Digital money.
See, and they just shut it off. In other words, I don't have to pay anything. We're just going to take out what we think you owe, and you may or may not have an appeal process, right? And
China's made
instantly,
it mandatory.
I'm shutting everything down.
Well, China's made it mandatory at time that you always have your phone with you.
Exactly, and then the social
You
credit.
don't have
So
your
in other
phone
words,
with you can go to jail. I mean,
right.
There you go. I mean, there's your minder, right?
Yep. And so, and the behavior, in other words, if you tie in behavior, and so, like I said, Larry Ellison had a good structure for medicine, right? It's a tool for the doctor. But he did say one other thing that was somewhat disturbing, is that he said the behavior. In other words, with all this granularity, if people realize that they're being watched and monitored and recorded at all times, it's a inhibitor on bad behavior, is what he said, right? So he thought massive surveillance was a good thing, because if people think they're being watched, it limits their behavior. Okay, but who watches the watchers, right? Who's watching AI, right? If you leave it over to them, that's the key here. In other words, okay, well, that's great if you think so, but who does that for the government? Who does that for AI? Who does that for the AI programmers? And that sort of thing. And if AI is running it, who's minding AI? How can we watch and monitor what AI does at all times and hold it accountable to that? So it'll be on its best behavior. See, so I mean, there's a lot of issues with the way that these things are being built. Like you said, at warp speed, this thing's getting built in this arms race. But the problem is this weapon system isn't being deployed overseas so much as it can be deployed here. And like nuclear testing, you're going to get the radiation fallout right here in your backyard, which is, your home. And like, well, how do we do this? So there's a lot of questions.
Worth so much money. It's worth so much money.
It's data's the new oil. It's literally
unimaginably valuable, right? I was talking with Mike Adams recently about that, because he's working on his own system, and one thing I would like, because he's like,
you say Mike Adams is working on his own AI system, or Oh
yeah, he talks about it sometimes. So I was talking with him about it, and he said, he has a plan to have all the books, in it and that sort of thing. And that's when I said, well, I would like, basically, I would like a expounding on what I actually told him. I'll say more than what I told him, and what I was thinking when we hung up was, I would like to have a map, let's say, of the Darien, of all the historical trails where everybody has gone, right? Like from all the different books. I got a stack of books here. I spent 3 days in the library today looking at different stuff in the Darien and shipping and stuff. I could see huge use for that AI to go through 1 million books really quickly, and it just can be amazing. I can see it can be stunningly amazing if you intelligently use this AI, right? You have to know what you want and know what to ask it, right?
Yep. And it has to have access to the information. And so, part of it is asking for its logic tree. The other part is saying what are your sources you can access. So
Right.
For both Grok and Perplexity, they couldn't resource the National Archives, because I asked him, can you go in the National Archives, look up these documents from the State Department and analyze them for continuity of these names? And it said, I don't have access to it. So it didn't have access to the National Archives. A lot of real-time data it doesn't have. So that's another thing, is it's limited. Like I said, it's a right now it's like 11-year-old genius. Perplexity is. Grok is more like a lieutenant, but he's a genius with a didactic memory, like a photographic memory, but he only has access to the school library and half the public library in town, right? So he doesn't have a lot of information. So he's really good at that, but he doesn't have all the information to process it effectively. And so you have to be cautious about that. So there's the internal, it's thought process, it's logic tree, but there's also what it's looking at for sources. And as you know, sometimes sources conflict with one another. How do you determine what's what? And that's what I was asking it. There's two conflicting sources. How do you weigh the evidence? And that shows its bias. So that was kind of interesting. And then there's one question here real quick. I'm interested in that Mike Adams one, because if you can plug in the sources and have something offline that's not, you hook up to the internet, but you download stuff and then it goes back offline. That's actually kind of neat the way that does. And if it doesn't, send your data somewhere and sell your information, I think that would be a very useful tool for a lot of people, like investigators, they could definitely use it. Research historians, that sort of thing, because if you can load it up with what you need, and then have it evaluated, that's huge. Just like those maps you were talking about with Darien, that's actually a pretty cool system.
I would just love to have every book ever written in there, so that that would be very useful for me.
That would be. And you said Mike Adams. So when does he think he's going to roll this thing out?
I think he's testing it right now. Let me ask him. I just messaged him on something else. Let me see.
Well, that'd be kind of cool.
Let me see. When are you rolling out AI?
And then while you're looking that up, there's a couple questions here. It says, this is from 79 Smith W60. Since this is an invasion, is there any movement to hold the Biden regime leadership accountable for their violation of Article 4, Section 4? Probably not. I mean, you heard from Mike, if Tom Holman he wants to do stuff, but he's not supported or backed up, are they serious? I mean, there's the rhetoric, but then there's the actions, right? So, in other words, like anybody that evaluates your leadership, okay, that's what they say, but what do they do? Right. And half the time the words are just words. They're designed to make you feel good. Right. They're designed to kind of get you calm. But what do you do? And that's the only thing to me. And again, that goes back to rape of the mind. That goes back to everything. You're going to tell me all kind of stuff. Right. And so what are you not telling me? And then what are you doing? Right. So the main thing, I'm going to look at your actions. What did you do? What are you actually doing? What are you not telling me? And then, okay, what are you telling me? And if what you tell me doesn't match what you're doing, do I really listen to you that much? No.
Yeah.
Right. What are you doing? And did you back this guy up? Right. So in other words, I'm saying I'm gonna make the city streets clean, and I put somebody in charge of the police force, but I don't give them any budget and I don't give them any backup, and I'm not having the attorney work with them.
Right.
Am I really that concerned about cleaning up the streets?
Yeah.
Nope. So if Tom Holman's not being backed up, are you serious? It's actions, right? It's deeds, not words. That's an old saying, but I think it's important. Deeds, not words, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what's he doing? What's he not? And sometimes it takes time, right? So we have to wait and see. But in this case, we've had, fairly good time, and we'll see. But there you go. So there was that question. There's another one here from Abdiel 515. I apologize if I pronounced that wrong. It says, speaking of funding, Mike, Moe, Masako, maybe let everyone know the best way to support you all.
Oh, Masako, can you put that up? Thank you. Thank you very much for asking, because we definitely need it.
Oh, yes.
Thank you
So
very, very much.
This is from michaelyan.com. The website address is showing on the screen right now. Or please support Michael's mission by subscribing Substack. Thank you very much. Okay.
And Substack's a good one because you also get all these little bulletins and plus this special content. So that's nice. And then, yep, sharing and caring. You're absolutely right. Holding that cell phone, you're radiating yourself. Yep, that's true. Never put it in your head or private parts. Yep, I'm pretty much done. So I've been baked many times. I was EOD for a while, so I'm surprised I'm still here actually. So yes, it's true. If you have the wired headphones, put those in. But yeah, it says, does anyone read the warnings on cell phones and microwave ovens? Yep, and that's true. But I am baked, so I'm just lucky to be here. So, but that is true. There's a lot of radiation in a lot of equipment out now. It used to be, don't stand in front of your TV screens, and now we've got, monitors all around us that are just, saturating us with all kind of radiation, which is unfortunate, but there it is. But thank you for that. Any other questions on anything?
Do you
Masako?
see any question?
Oh,
Before I forget, I would like to introduce or announce the coming up video, which is Al has mentioned that we did an interview in Panama, Darien, talking about how AI can lie to us. And Al investigated or interrogated AI, and he explained it to me by using the benchmark questions. That interview is coming up soon. And let me show you the intro quickly. This one.
With the right hand, look what the left hand is doing. And it means that if I'm doing something publicly and doing something very showy.
Oh, sorry. I didn't show. Let me do it again here.
Real intent is, and they're all lined up together. Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk. You have these.
And TikTok CEO.
You see, exactly. So, but now with AI, it's like you have a personal person looking at you all the time that knows you better than you.
It's possible that AI lied to us. What's the mechanism?
Oh,
Because like AI, it's like we feel like it's 1 + 1 = 2. There's no 1 + 1 = 3.
There's the old Kermit.
Okay, so now we're talking about. Okay, so this is the intro, and it will be published on my YouTube, and hopefully Michael can share with the audience here. So please be looking forward to it.
Wow, thank you. Your video skills are amazing. It actually makes it look so dramatic. I'm just sitting there enjoying coffee, talking, but it was like
that was in Darien, actually.
like what movie? Yeah, what movie is this? I'm like, wait a minute. Sitting down watching the Darien traffic.
I recognize where that was at. That was right beside China Camp where you're doing that interview.
Yes, and also people, I want to recommend this interview, not only those who are interested in AI, but also people like me. I asked this question, some kind of issue that I had, meaning I've been using phone a lot, and especially X, and people are watching. I think more than 9,000 people are watching on X this live stream. So maybe you have the same issue as I did, meaning a lot of the too much stimuli, constant of clicking and to very super happy video or super disgusting information. Like I was so distracted, and I came to the point where I felt so uneasy, and I was not physically feeling well. So Al taught me about tips how I can get rid of those. And so this was very good interview, not only for the information, but for mental health. So I really recommend for everyone. Okay, thank you very much. And I will put the link of the YouTube. I have many other, my X, it's going to be on my X and YouTube and Rumble, many multiple platforms, so that some of the video will survive if any censors. Yes. So
it's good to have redundancy out there. Yeah, your video skills are very entertaining. It's fascinating to watch. It's like, wow, I wish I had those skills. Those are pretty good.
Yeah, you're very good at that and very quick. Yeah, Masako, you've been to 30 countries in the last 4 years, examining what's going on in this world. What do you think? What, in summary and in closing, what do you think is going to happen in this year?
This new year.
Yes.
It's not time for us to do the victory march yet. We need to keep expanding our knowledge, awareness, and we need to continue in this fight.
Yes. Count me in. All right. We should say goodnight. Al, anything else?
Nope, that's a perfect way to close.
All right. And good night from me. And thank you, everybody who's donated, or because this is the only sponsor we have is you. There's no soap commercials or anything. Thank you for joining Substack or donating to PayPal or Venmo or direct to the bank or to the PO box. All these methods work. I really appreciate it. Thank you. It's necessary. These things are expensive. It was $930 for that helicopter a couple days ago, but the pictures were important. They were worth it. So anyway, you guys have a good night.
All right, have a good night. Thanks again.
Bye.